Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 6 o'clock on Friday, the 27th of October. Today,
a massive challenge for the Home Office as attempts to clear the backlog in the asylum system could risk creating new delays, according to a damning new report by MPs. But does the government have the will or the ability to deal with more than 67,000 undecided cases? Olivia Utley will have more.
The government has promised to end the use of hotels for migrants, but a new report today shows that the backlog of asylum seekers just keeps going up. How on earth is the government going to stick to its promise?
as a Tory MP reveals he was arrested on suspicion of rape, the number of Conservatives embroiled in sexual misconduct allegation grows to a total of 9. How damaging will this be to a party already on the back foot? We'll have the latest.
And as Israel gears up for a full ground invasion and the West throws its weight behind them, Vladimir Putin wades into the conflict, inviting senior Hamas and Iranian leaders to Moscow for talks. Mark White will have all the latest.
Well, it comes as US forces carried out a strike against what they said were Iranian Revolutionary Guard positions in eastern Syria. 20 US soldiers have been injured in recent clashes.
18 dead, 13 injured and 3 in critical condition as police in the US state of Maine continue their manhunt after a deadly mass shooting. We'll have the latest live from Washington.
And Alex Burgill, of course, will have all your latest weather forecasts.
Good morning. Watch out for some fog first thing this morning, but that will clear and then it's showers or longer spells of rain for many. I'll have more details later.
And please join us in a very big, warm welcome to the newest member of the breakfast family. Ashley Wilmot will be here with all the sport. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome.
So good to be here. We've got a lot to talk about. We're going to be looking back at the Europa League action from last night, as well as discussing why England probably wish the Cricket World Cup was already over.
Yeah, they're not alone with that.
Absolutely terrible. Shocking. Anyway, I'm Martin Daubney. Good morning.
I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News. Good morning to you and thank you so much for your company. Now to our top story, the asylum backlog that refuses to go away. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak pledged the Home Office would clear a huge number of asylum claims by the end of the year. Well, it seems he, so far, is nowhere near delivering.
Yeah, the hope was to ease overcrowding in migrant detention centres and save the taxpayer money on hotels, holding thousands of people seeking asylum, and that's now £8 million every single day. A report by a cross-party committee says a huge challenge remains for the Home Office, and the government's plan to reform the asylum system to speed the process up is incomplete and unrealistic.
Well, for more on this and other news from Westminster, we are joined now by our political correspondent, Olivia Utley. Very good to see you this morning, Olivia. And before we get into the asylum backlog, I just wanted to touch on Crispin Blunt, who has confirmed he is the MP who was arrested on Wednesday on suspicion of rape. So please do tell us the latest.
Yeah, this should be an absolutely shocking story. A Conservative MP arrested for rape. But unfortunately, things like this have happened so often over the past couple of years, it's almost gone unnoticed in Westminster. There are now 9 Conservative MPs who've had the whip suspended for allegations of sexual misconduct. 2 Conservative MPs are serving prison sentences. They were tried and convicted of sexual crimes. And there are another 7 who are in a limbo period, either awaiting a court judgment or awaiting the judgment of the whips. Now, Crispin Blunt, it must be said, absolutely denies all allegations. He made a statement, a very unusual statement last night, confirming that he was the MP. There was lots of speculation last night that Crispin Blunt was at the centre of these rape allegation claims. But he has said that he is confident, he is helping the police with their inquiries, and he's confident that this won't result in a conviction. Now, Crispin Blunt has a very, very colourful history as an MP. He grew up in a traditional sort of upper middle class background, but then developed some very sort of liberal principles, which at times have been completely at odds with his own front benches. He, for example, very recently has been pretty much the lone supporter of Palestinians on the Conservative benches and has asked Israel to restrain itself. Years ago, he also came out as gay, ending a 20-year marriage to his wife, which at the time was seen as a pretty sort of controversial move for a Conservative MP. And then he admitted to using the sex drug poppies in a debate in the House of Commons. So this is an MP with a very colourful history indeed. And the investigation is ongoing now. Crispin Blunt says that he is absolutely convinced that it won't result in a conviction. But either way, it's quite a headache for the Conservative government.
Olivia, a resurgent Labour Party, a Tory party mired by sleaze. It feels like the 1990s all over again. How damaging do you think this will be for the Tories running up to the general election?
Well, I think that this story in itself, you know, not that many people have heard of Crispin Blunt in the wider public. This by itself might not be too damaging. But as I say, given that there are now 9 Conservative MPs who are under some sort of cloud because of allegations of sexual misconduct, I think those things add up in the public's mind. And if you're just an ordinary person, an ordinary voter sitting at home, this will just seem like, oh, not again. As you say, it feels very much like the 1990s. This feels like the dying days of the John Major government. The question now is whether we will see the resurgence of popularity of Labour and a sort of new dawn in the way that we saw with Tony Blair. I'm slightly sceptical of predicting that, simply because I don't think there is the same sort of energy and enthusiasm behind Keir Starmer as there was behind Tony Blair in 1997. But the next few months could well prove me wrong.
Olivia, I wanted to ask you about Rishi Sunak pledging that the Home Office would clear a huge number of asylum claims by the end of this year. Well, that's not looking too hopeful, is it, according to this new report?
No, it's not looking too hopeful at all. This is a very damning new report by the Commons Public Accounts Committee, and essentially it throws cold water over Robert Jenrick's claim that the asylum backlog is going down. He stood up in the Commons a few days ago and made a statement saying that because of work by the government, the asylum backlog is now going down, and the government is now in a position to start ending contracts with hotels that are being used to house migrants. Well, the Public Accounts Committee has essentially pointed out that although the legacy backlog might be going down, i.e. old claims that were made before 2022, that is going down very slowly. But obviously at the same time, new claims are coming in. So actually the overall backlog is higher than it was 6 months ago. Now, it's very unclear how the government is going to deal with this situation. There are currently 400 hotels being used to house about 50,000 migrants at a cost of £8 million a day to the taxpayer. Now, Jenrick has said he will close about 100 of them over the next 6 months. But this report suggests that that will probably be impossible if the new claims keep coming in. Now, really, what the Conservatives need to do is get to the root of the problem and start processing these claims faster. But that's easier said than done. There are a lot of caseworkers in the Home Office working on these cases, and yet the average time for an asylum claim to be processed it's really astonishing, 430 days. So that's over a year. Now, Labour have said that they will fix this problem by simply employing another 1,000 Home Office caseworkers. But with the numbers of migrants just going up by the day, this bottleneck is getting bigger and bigger. It's a very tricky task for whichever government takes it on.
A tricky task and definitely a huge challenge. Thank you so much, Olivia Utley, there for us in Westminster.
Now, the member for Reigate identified himself on social media as the man Surrey police detained in Hawley yesterday morning. In a statement, he said the following: "It has been reported that an MP was arrested in connection with an allegation of rape. I am confirming that MP was me. The fact of the arrest requires a formal notification of the Speaker and then my Chief Whip. I have now been interviewed twice in connection with this incident, the first time 3 weeks ago when I initially reported my concern over extortion. The second time was earlier this morning under caution following arrest. The arrest was unnecessary as I remain ready to fully cooperate with the investigation that I'm confident will end without charge. I do not intend to say anything further on this matter until the police have completed their inquiries."
That statement there from Crispin Blunt MP. And of course, this is a developing story and we'll have more for you on GB News across the day. Let's get back to the asylum backlog story, which is our lead story today. Joining us now is international security and border control expert Henry Bolton, OBE. Very good to see you this morning, Mr. Bolton. This is a damning new report, isn't it? And as we just heard from Olivia Utley, she says it throws cold water on the claims from the government that backlog is going down.
Indeed. And, you know, some of us have been saying for a very long time now, 2-3 years, that the government actually needs to put the resources into the processing side of the asylum claims. Otherwise, exactly this would happen. They didn't listen. Everything that the Home Office has done regarding immigration, regarding the asylum system, regarding the small boats, has been one-off, standalone decisions or actions or changes, rather than being part of an overall strategic framework with a set of serious national objectives that all the different agencies can align themselves to and properly resourced. Now, that's what most countries have. We don't. And the other thing about this, and the report highlights this or sort of illustrates this very well, is that you can't simply do something in one area without of asylum without it having a knock-on somewhere else. And, you know, if you are not processing correctly, you are going, or fast enough, if you haven't put the resources into it, if you haven't trained your staff adequately, which is the case, then you are going to have a problem in terms of accommodation. And so then you end up with additional taxpayer costs there. You know, it is mind-bogglingly incompetent of the Home Office to have put it together like this. There is no plan.
Labour Party would say that clearing the backlog is the answer, but what would you say to the fact that the UK has one of the lowest return rates and refusal rates for asylum in all of mainland Europe? In fact, only 24% of claims are knocked back. So surely clearing the backlog would just mean more people being granted asylum in the UK, which won't solve the problem at all.
Indeed, you're absolutely right, Martin. And that is essentially the plan. There's a simplification of the questions that are going to be asked now. That's the idea already with the government. Labour, I'm sure, would just simply put more resources into asking equally simple and thin questions. They're not probing enough by any means. And the staff asking the questions have no knowledge whatsoever of the areas that these people have either come from or travelled through. So they're totally ill-equipped to make a proper decision. It becomes a paperwork tick box exercise rather than a proper investigation into the asylum claim. But the other thing, Martin, is you've got sort of three elements. You've got why are people leaving the place that they are leaving? You've got why are they moving along the route that they are moving along, and how do we disrupt that? And then you've got the pull factor. Why do they come to the UK? And all of that is really, it's not being dealt with. You mentioned the returns, but to do a return, you've got to connect your immigration and your Home Office with your foreign affairs, with the embassies and so on, with the foreign and Commonwealth and Development Office. That's not happening. There is no unified structure. There is no national working group trying to work this issue. The Home Office wants something. They have to go to the Foreign Office. The Foreign Office then scrabbles around, talks about it, thinks about it a bit, scratches their head, goes back, asks a few questions. And, it takes a month of Sundays to even sort of get any ball rolling, let alone sort of get an agreement completed. The whole thing needs to go back to the drawing board, and I know that means that in the meantime we've got to continue this sort of band-aid type of response. But we need to have a national working group, a borders working group, that brings all these agencies together with sufficient authority, somebody chairing it with sufficient authority to make them actually coordinate, put together a proper plan, national strategic objectives, and ensuring the unity of effort of all the government agencies involved. Even Albania has that. Macedonia has it. Tajikistan, some of the poorest countries in the Northern Hemisphere have done this, and it works. The UK does not. One final example, Martin. We've got, by my calculation, depends how you sort of work it, but 7 or 8 different government departments and agencies with patrol vessels working on in the English Channel. Now, I know that's slightly different to the asylum processing, but it's an illustration of how badly organised this is. You go to Finland, you go to Sweden, you go to Canada, you go to the United States, you go to Holland, you go to any of these places, and you will find that you have got one agency that responds to all the various things on their borders. So like a police patrol car will respond to a burglary or a drunken disorderly or a road traffic collision. Here we don't. We've got Border Force dealing with immigration on the maritime borders. We've got the Navy and we've got the fisheries protection vessels doing the fisheries protection. We've got other people doing pollution control. They're all a different agency for each thing. It's like having a police car dealing with road traffic collisions, another one to deal with drunken disorderly, another one to deal with burglaries. I mean, it's just mind-bogglingly inefficient.
OK, Henry Bolton, we're going to have to leave it there. I know you could keep talking until Christmas. Thank you. Expert analysis, as ever. Thank you for joining us on Breakfast.
Thank you very much. Now, the time is 15 minutes past 6. If you've just joined us, a reminder of our top stories this morning. And a massive challenge for the Home Office as attempts to clear the backlog in the asylum system could risk creating new delays. That's according to a damning new report by MPs.
As a Tory MP reveals he was arrested on suspicion of rape, the number of Conservatives embroiled in sexual misconduct allegations grows.
Vladimir Putin wades into the conflict in the Middle East, inviting senior Hamas and Iranian leaders to Moscow for talks, a move that Israel has called obscene.
18 dead, 13 injured and 3 in critical condition as police in the US state of Maine continue their manhunt after a deadly mass shooting yesterday.
And with Britain's water facing scandal after scandal, we'll be quizzing the Shadow Environment Secretary Steve Reid on what Labour would do to clean up our waters. That's in just an hour's time.
To our next story, a delegation from Hamas visited Moscow yesterday for talks over foreign and Russian hostages being held by the group in Gaza.
The Kremlin, which blames the current crisis on the failure of US diplomacy and wants an immediate ceasefire, has ties to all key players in the region, including Israel, Iran and Palestine.
But the chances of Moscow's attempts to mediate the conflict look low as Israel calls its move an obscene step and Western officials warn of an axis of terror.
Well, it's day 21, would you believe, of the Israel-Hamas conflict, and EU leaders are calling for so-called humanitarian pauses in fighting between Israel and Hamas in order to allow aid into Gaza. But they're not asking for a ceasefire.
They say rapid, safe and unhindered access is needed as 27 EU nations express gravest concern for the humanitarian situation on the ground.
UN aid agencies say they have begun to significantly reduce their operations in Gaza because they have almost exhausted their fuel reserves.
Meanwhile, Hamas says about 50 hostages being held in Gaza have been killed as a result of Israel bombarding the Strip in retaliation for Hamas's 7th of October attack.
Well, let's cross live now to GB News' security editor, Mark White, who is in Tel Aviv for us this morning. Good morning to you, Mark. And extraordinary scenes. President Putin of Russia inviting Hamas to Moscow.
Yes, well, as you heard, the Israelis say it's obscene. Western leaders don't really put much store in him actually achieving anything. I mean, he wants to play the world leader and the statesman. Maybe he'll get some concessions out of Hamas. Maybe they'll be willing to release some more hostages just as a gesture. Who knows? I want to bring you some breaking news first of all, though. We're just getting reports from the Israel Defense Forces in the last few minutes that another ground raid has taken place in central Gaza overnight. Dozens of tanks, bulldozers used to demolish the border fence into Gaza, and dozens of soldiers involved in what was a coordinated raid attacking a number of what IDF said were terrorist sites, including anti-tank missile launchers. It's the second day in a row that we've had a significant incursion into Gaza. This, we're told, is a shaping exercise preparing the way for the eventual ground invasion. And here in Tel Aviv, it's been an eventful 24 hours as well. We've had 4 separate major rocket attacks targeting this city in the past 24 hours. 3 yesterday alone, including one last night, in which there was a very significant number of rockets that were intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome. Those Iron Dome missiles going into the air. It was quite a spectacular but frightening sight, as well as sirens sounded throughout Tel Aviv, and people had to scramble for the shelters. And that really makes, I think, the ground war, as far as Israel's concerned, inevitable, because they believe that they can only really truly go after Hamas and stop its capability to launch these missiles into Israel by tackling them on the ground. And another major development to tell you about from overnight: the United States military has struck 2 targets in eastern Syria, targets that they say were Iranian Revolutionary Guard targets, responsible, according to the US, for drone strikes that have targeted US troops in Syria and Iraq in recent days. 20 US service personnel were injured in those drone strikes. We know that the US is frantically scrambling to get missile defense systems around all of its assets in the Middle East, because they know that when that ground invasion eventually begins, it won't just be Israel that will suffer a huge retaliatory strike, but those Western allies of Israel could well come under attack as well.
And Mark, reports overnight as America beefs up its presence in the area. US strikes on bases in Syria. How concerning is that in as far as the conflict spreading throughout the region further?
Yes, well, as I just said, there is concern about the widening of this conflict, and that's why the US carried out these airstrikes on these Iranian Revolutionary Guard positions that they say were being used to launch these drone strikes that struck those US forces. Now, the US are trying to make the distinction that this is completely separate to what is happening in Gaza, that they did not do this in coordination with the Israelis. However, it's linked, of course it is, because no one believes that these strikes on the US forces were not as a consequence of what is unfolding in Gaza, and of course the US and other Western allies' response and backing for Israel in its endeavours to destroy Hamas.
OK, Mark White for us in Tel Aviv, thank you very much for that update.
Moving on, this year's Royal British Legion poppies are plastic-free and recyclable, and they are now on sale to raise funds for veterans, of course. But while the poppy design has changed, its meaning as a universal symbol of remembrance for peace remains the same.
Our Yorkshire reporter Anna Riley went to the Poppy Appeal launch in Leeds.
Order, standard.
Standard bearers mark the launch of the National Poppy Appeal in Leeds. It helps veterans like Simon Brown, who was shot in the face during a tour in Iraq. The bullet entered his left cheek and exited the other side.
I was fortunate enough to be conscious, survive the event, did my own first aid for 25 minutes, and then when we got to medical facilities at Basel Palace, I was put into a drug-induced coma, and I woke up Christmas Eve 2006, and then found out, you know, what the damage actually was. Over 10 years, I had 25 operations, about 140 hours of surgery to reconstruct my face. My left eye was removed and I retained 25% vision in my right eye.
It's not just the funds raised, but the symbol of the poppy that supports those that have served in the armed forces.
Wearing a poppy just says, you know, I see your suffering and I'm thinking of you.
Tragically, soldiers like Chris Turton have paid the ultimate sacrifice. He lost his life in 2007 after his vehicle was destroyed by IEDs in Iraq. Today would have been the 19th wedding anniversary with his widow, Sharon.
I'd lost my military family when I lost Chris, so the Royal British Legion became my new family. I started off as a volunteer, now I'm a member of staff. So you cut me open and it's poppies that come out of me. But that's the way they've helped me. They've given me something else to live for, and I'm also able to keep Chris in other people's thoughts as well as my own.
The Royal British Legion community has given veteran Jonathan Calvert a new purpose as a civilian.
I've just retired recently from the Air Force and I want to give back to the community. The Royal British Legion have helped me so much. Helping with transitioning from being in service for over 20 years to now being a veteran.
The newly designed plastic-free poppy is hoped to boost fundraising this year.
The Poppy Appeal this year is obviously very exciting. It's the first new poppy for 28 years that we've had, so it's redesigned, which is very eco-friendly. We would like as many people as possible to support the Poppy Appeal because we'd like to really let them know that they do care and they're looking after our armed forces community.
The poppy represents all those who lost their lives in service. From the First World War to now, we will remember them. Anna Riley, GB News, Leeds.
Oh, thanks to Anna for that report. And if you can, do buy a poppy, do support the Royal British Legion and the incredible work that they do for our veterans. We are wearing the old-style poppies today. We've got the plastic ones, haven't we?
And we're going to recycle them, of course.
We are. But the new-style poppies, as you may have just heard from Anna, they are paper. They're fully recyclable. They've gone green, not in colour, but in the sense that they are environmentally friendly. They're actually from, did you know this, recyclable coffee cups.
Oh, they really?
Yeah, they're reused.
That's good. How's it arriving today, those paper ones? I'm keen to see how they get through a lapel. Because I like the plastics that goes through a lapel on a suit easy without having to cut the whole thing open. I always have a metal one.
Well, do you?
Yeah, but I feel a bit tight wearing last year's metal one. I always feel like I should donate.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I've got a really nice blingy one with like diamante crystals on it, which I really, really like. But same, I like to feel like I'm buying and you know, making a donation every single year.
but
I suppose you can do that anyway.
Yeah, I wonder if people out there like me think there aren't as many people out there selling poppies anymore, or even in your local supermarket, you don't tend to see them for sale as often. You know, does that make you feel a bit sad? It does me, actually. I think you know, they should be everywhere. When I see RAF members or Army members or Navy members in stations with the little box, it just makes my heart swell. For me, it's part of the appeal of the whole day is seeing that splendour and just remembering and just that direct visceral connection.
Yeah, me too. It makes me feel very proud. Well, do let us know, are you wearing your poppy yet? Will you be buying the new paper one? Will you be laying a wreath? I know some people actually get big wreaths for their houses as well. Do let us know, gbnews@gbnews.com. Let's get the weather now with Alex Burkle.
Hello, good morning. It's Alex Burkle here with your latest GB News weather forecast. A bit of a foggy start for some of us this morning, but then the unsettled theme continues with showers or longer spells of rain. Any mist and murk and fog will gradually clear as we go through the morning. Persistent rain affecting eastern parts of Scotland still. Totals continuing to build up as we go through into the weekend, so some issues here. Otherwise, a fair few showers developing, some of them heavy, perhaps even thundery, and becoming more widespread, pushing inland as we go into the afternoon. Some sunny spells though, and temperatures near normal for the time of year. Highs around 15 Celsius in the south, cooler further north. We're going to continue to see more rain across particularly eastern parts of Scotland as we go through Friday night. Might become a bit more widespread across other parts of Scotland through the night as well. Otherwise, plenty of showers again developing. These will be heavy at times across southern southeastern parts, could cause some impacts here as we go through the early hours of Saturday. Some clear skies around though, so we could see some mist and fog developing once more, and temperatures may be a touch lower than last night for quite a few places. Saturday then, a blustery, showery day for many places. Still seeing some cloud and rain across eastern parts of Scotland, which is why some issues are quite likely. Otherwise, heavy showers, especially towards the south, and notice a spell of wet and windy weather starting to push into the far south later on in the day. Temperatures similar to today for most, perhaps a touch higher for some places, getting into your mid-teens Celsius. Bye-bye.
Coming up, we'll have the latest sports news with the newest member of our breakfast family, Ashley Wilmot. We're looking forward to that, aren't we?
We certainly are. Stay with us. This is GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sunday, the 29th of October at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Welcome back. The time is 6:31. You are watching and listening to Breakfast with Ellie and Martin. And you've got a lovely email in, Martin, from Tony, who's a fan of yours and says, have you been away, Martin? You look fabulous.
Well, that's very nice of you, Tony. Yes, I've been to Rhodes for a week, and I've got a little tip for you.
Oh, yeah.
If you want a cheap holiday, follow natural disasters. It's true, because all the fires in Rhodes meant all the holidays were half price. There's no danger of fire when I was there, 'cause it was October half term. It was magnificent, it was cheap, it was brilliant, and it was 28 degrees every day. Wonderful place.
Oh, well, I'm glad you had a lovely time. Tony doesn't miss a trick, does he?
Doesn't. Thank you,
No.
mate.
Well, there you go. Do keep your emails coming in on anything. It could be a compliment from Martin or an opinion on any of the stories that we're talking about today. gbviews@gbnews.com. We do love to hear from you.
So you do. OK, as you know, this is Breakfast on GB News, and if you are heading out soon, then do take us with us on your GB News radio. Let's have a look at some other stories coming up in the newsroom today.
As many as 1.7 million people in England and Wales could be living with conditions such as Alzheimer's within 17 years. That's according to a study published in The Lancet. This comes as dementia cases could be 40% higher than previously thought by the year 2040.
And the Health Foundation charity has revealed NHS waiting lists could top a staggering 8 million by next year. The modelling work suggests industrial action has contributed a small amount. However, chronic shortages of funding and staff remain the key driver of the backlog.
And in the US, the manhunt continues for a gunman who carried out a mass shooting where 18 people have died in Lewiston, Maine. Law enforcement surrounded a house and executed a search warrant linked to the prime suspect, Robert Card, as officials continue to look for the 40-year suspect, who is an Army reservist who struggled with mental health issues. That's according to his family.
Well, joining us now is political analyst in Washington, D.C., Eric Ham, a friend of the show. Hello to you, Eric. Another mass shooting, another grave situation. What's the latest? Is Robert Card, the suspect, still at large?
Well, yeah, he's still at large. And of course, we know that the death toll continues to rise, the number of people injured, and not only a town, but an entire state is terrorized by this shooting. And it, of course, marked more than 500 mass shootings in the United States.
Eric, this is just the most horrific news. Mass shootings, it feels, happen just so regularly in the US. How is the community in Maine responding to this?
Well, people are sheltering in place. We know that there is a statewide manhunt for the individual. We do know that he certainly knows his way around weapons and certainly has the training to know how to use these weapons. He's considered armed and dangerous. And of course, people are afraid, and rightfully so. And now, of course, there are a lot of discussions taking place as to what should happen, what should the nation do about the issue of guns. But it doesn't appear as though, at least at the national level, that we're going to see any real legislation actually on guns.
And Eric, it seems that Robert Card was known at both venues where the shootings occurred, bowling alley and the bar. He frequented them allegedly with some regularity. So it seems this wasn't entirely random.
Well, both he as well as his family were known for having guns on their compound. People seem to be wary of them. And of course, we know that he spent at least 2 weeks in a mental facility over the summer. Of course, now there will be many questions about what, of course, did the military know about his mental fitness and health, and what, if anything, was done. And it's also important to note that in the state of Maine, there are no red flag laws. Red flag laws are laws that are actually in place in some states where if there are mental issues or concerns about an individual having access to weapons, then those weapons would be removed. In the case of the state of Maine, there is no such law to ensure that people like Robert Card do not actually have access to guns.
And Eric Ham, do you think that will change now? Do you think that's where the conversation will turn, that there needs to be red flag laws in Maine? Because it does appear to be a complete security failure that a man like Robert Card, who we know had a history of mental health problems, had access to a gun.
Yeah, I think those are all really good questions. And of course, we know that just recently, the state actually passed legislation making it easier to access guns. And of course, we have been seeing states all across the country actually passing laws making it easier to access weapons, even as we continue to see the number of mass shootings continue to rise in this country. And so it remains to be seen if, in fact, Maine is willing to go that far to implement such laws in the wake of this shooting.
OK, Eric Ham from Washington, D.C., thanks for that latest update on a fast-moving story. Appreciate it.
Well, it's time to go through all the latest sports now with the newest member of the Breakfast family and sports broadcaster Ashley Wilmot. Welcome, Ashley. Welcome to Breakfast. How are you?
Yeah, great. How are you? Happy Friday, guys.
Yeah, happy Friday. And there's lots to talk about, isn't there? Should we start with the Europa League action?
Let's definitely start there. There is lots to get through. So Olympiacos beat West Ham 2-1, which means they put a stop to West Ham's 17-game unbeaten run. So a disappointing game for them. But ultimately, they'll be looking at themselves thinking, we could have probably at least come away with a point, because the second goal came from West Ham standing captain Angelo Ogbonna, and he basically gave an own goal. So by that point, they're 2-0 down. They did manage to come back in the second half, but waited to the 87th minute. Luca Paqueta, brilliant volley, but just a little bit too late. You've only got 90 minutes, and if you leave it that late, it's not really ideal, is it?
Indeed, they're better fortunes for Liverpool. And does that mean they'll finally stop moaning about that offside against Spurs?
Maybe one day. But yes, I feel like they've got nothing to complain about. Liverpool had a fantastic night, maybe the perfect night. 5-1 win against Toulouse. Now, Toulouse did give a really good account of themselves, but unfortunately, they just didn't have that quality. Liverpool, you can always expect them to step up on these big occasions. They're now 5 points clear at the top of their group. Klopp also celebrating the fact he can really utilise his squad. He brought on some younger players, James McConnell from Sunderland and Callum Scanlon from Birmingham. They've got some now great European experience. I bet their families are buzzing. Yeah. They saw their boys on the pitch last night. I'm sure there'll be a few sore heads in Liverpool.
There certainly will be. Liverpool looking good then at the moment.
Yeah. You know what? People are thinking this could be their time. And they have won the Europa League 3 times. But can you give a guess as to when the last time might have been?
It's got to be 7 or 8 years ago.
At least. 2001.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Wow, there you go. 21 years. Now.
But it could change now.
Who knows?
And Brighton, they've made history, haven't they?
They have indeed. A 2-0 victory over Ajax. I mean, how amazing is that? Ajax even. Ajax really not in form at the moment. I don't know what's going on. They're obviously having a few struggles with their manager, but Brighton don't mind about that at all. They just feel like if they can play against a team like Ajax week in, week out like that, then they'll be really pleased. They've lost one, they've drawn one, now they've won one, and not only have they done that, they've beaten 4-time European champions.
Now, actually, I've got a question for you. Eamon Holmes, as you know, always bangs on about Manchester United.
Yeah, you always bang on about Forest.
Yeah, I tried to shoehorn Nottingham Forest into anything. So for full transparency, as you're new to the team, who's your team?
Oh, no, I'm very impartial, Martin. Don't put me on the spot
She's
like that.
She's a journalist.
I can't be supporting these teams.
That old chestnut, yeah.
Yeah, but nice, like that. A little curveball from you.
And should we take a look at the cricket?
Oh, do we have to?
Yeah, it's not good, is it?
Yeah, it's not looking ideal, to be honest. England title defence in complete tatters, really. People are calling this one of the worst performances they've seen from England against Sri Lanka. It's a real shame. We're not used to seeing England so far down the table. They're 9th in the table. They sit above Netherlands, but 8 nations above them, which is not what we like to see.
Why are we doing so badly, Ashley?
I don't know.
How long have you got?
I honestly don't know. There's lots of questions being asked of the team.
It's our sport.
Yeah, I know. What's going on?
We invented it.
They need to sort it out.
How come it's so bad?
The game lasted just... the game lasted just 59 overs. It was the shortest game of the tournament. England bowled out for just 156. It's unheard of. Yeah, mathematically, they're still in it, but they probably need a bit of a miracle. So if anyone's got any advice, I'm sure they're open to it.
Well, Martin, got anything to offer England?
Change nationality.
Oh, dear.
No, swap
they're up against India
Look for
as
some
well.
distant Australian lineage in your family tree.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, you know, my cousin is obsessed with cricket. He won't even watch it at the moment.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he said it's just like watching a car crash. It's like watching your favourite pub burn down. Oh. You know, it's
I've
just
been
that
told.
bad.
It's really, really appalling stuff from them, which is such a shame because we obviously want them to do well. But they have to pick themselves up, reset and go against the host, India, on Sunday. India, They've not lost a game.
Oh,
It's going to be tough.
That is going to be tough. Ashley, thank you so much for just talking us through everything going on in the world of sport. And you're going to be with us throughout the morning, aren't you? Welcome. Really good to have you.
And I'm going to keep working on. There's no way she's neutral.
I know.
No, 'cause
You'll find
they
out.
all say that.
You'll get there. You'll find out. Let us know if you're a cricket fan. How are you feeling about the way England are playing at the moment? GBviews at gbnews.com. Lots of you getting in touch this morning. Lots of you talking about immigration. Bet, good morning to you, says the backlog could be cleared very quickly. If you can't prove who you are and you have no papers, you should be out. It's as simple as that.
And Stuart's, no doubt his thoughts will be echoed by a lot of people tuning in today. There is a simple solution in reducing the asylum backlog. It's called simply return immediately. Anyone that enters the country illegally, no one that breaks the law by entering illegally should be allowed to make an asylum claim in the first place.
And Janice says there is a permanent advert for immigration officers, but it seems the application is impossible to complete successfully. Interesting. Do keep your views coming in. GBviews at gbnews.com.
OK, coming up, more than 50 years after the Beatles broke up, the band have announced the release of their last ever song. We'll be speaking about that and more on the Headline Makers. That's next. This is GB News.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth. It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 6:45. If you've just joined us, a reminder of our top stories this morning.
A massive challenge for the Home Office as attempts to clear the backlog in the asylum system could risk creating new delays. That's according to a damning new report by MPs.
As a Tory MP reveals he was arrested on suspicion of rape, the number of Conservatives embroiled in sexual misconduct allegations grows.
Vladimir Putin wades into the conflict in the Middle East, inviting senior Hamas and Iranian leaders to Moscow for talks, a move that Israel has called obscene.
18 dead, 13 injured and 3 in critical condition as police in the US state of Maine continue their manhunt after a deadly mass shooting yesterday.
With Britain's water facing scandal after scandal, we'll be quizzing the Shadow Environment Secretary, Steve Reed, on what Labour would do to clean up our waters.
And the annual Poppy Appeal launches across the UK, and we've been in Leeds speaking to veterans about how important Remembrance is for them. We'll bring you this report later in the show.
And as GB News learns that there have been high-level government discussions about hosting Palestinian refugees in the UK, we'll be debating whether the UK should introduce a similar scheme like the ones used for Ukrainians. Well, joining us now to go through some of the day's headlines is author and journalist Susan Holder and leader of the Heritage Party, David Curtin. Very good to see you both this morning. Thank you so much for your company. Susan, let's start with you, shall we? And there's a story in The Guardian about fears over AI.
Yes, so basically, there's been talk for quite a long time about how we should be pausing the rapid development of AI, and a professor of physics at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Max Tegmark, has called for a 6-month hiatus on giant AI experiments, just because of the rise in exponential kind of progress they can make. So there's that kind of thing. Rishi Sunak has also this week announced an establishment of an AI Safety Institute, but has said that he thinks it's unfeasible to actually put any sort of kind of stop on the development. They want to kind of look at just the safety aspects. How feasible that is, I don't know, when we can't seem to kind of get Facebook to do what it should do when people want to block things or have problems on that. AI itself, obviously, the main thing people are talking about, I think, as a problem is the way it will multiply itself. And actually, if you program to say something like save the world, what they might think, what the AI would think would be a way to save the world might not include us. It's things like, it's just like giant issues that could come from the power of computers that are 100 times more powerful than the ones we're using.
And David, can I bring you in on this one? Because there was a lot of talk yesterday by Rishi Sunak about how only the nation states coming together can save us from the terror of AI. It felt a bit like COVID all over again to me. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think that's a very bad idea. I mean, I think this is statism, and this is the advance towards making governments and supranational governments. I thought this would be done through organisations like the UN and the World Economic Forum in charge of tech companies and what happens in the tech sector, which is completely wrong. I mean, the private sector should be allowed to get on with what the private sector does, not governments intervening and controlling everything that happens. I mean, that's a very, very dangerous road to go down. But there are genuine concerns about AI, absolutely. I mean, this is very powerful technology of the like that we've never, ever had before. So we do need to make sure that this isn't going to take us into a future which is dystopian, and the possibility for that exists.
I mean, of course, Rishi Sunak, Susan, would say that there are real benefits to AI. I mean, he was speaking from a hospital, talking about the benefits for the health sector in terms of surgery and also detecting illnesses. Will make things a lot easier in that sense, will streamline that. And in terms of admin, obviously streamline that process as well. So his focus was very much on AI being in the right hands, wasn't it? And that's why it's so important for us to be on the front foot of this.
Absolutely, but who decides? I mean, David makes a good point. Who decides who the right hands are? Yeah. And depending on who's in power at any one time, which way does it go? I mean, obviously, something like this, like any kind of technological advance, it's do you use your power for good or for evil? That is the question that we're facing. But regulation and monitoring, and also I just think it is quite a sensible thing to ask for slowing down. Just because we can do something, you always do have to ask, should we? And I do think you can get very overexcited about the fact that technology can do all sorts of things. We're seeing it every day. We're seeing it in the loss of cash, in the way that they harvest all our information everywhere we go, because we can. But should we? There's those kind of issues. And actually, I don't know how we kind of get a hold on that as a world, because there's always going to be different opinions on how you look at that and what is a good thing.
Great point. David, on to a story which no doubt will rise your shackles. The BBC, once again in a white privilege storm, this time on BBC News Round. What's all this about?
Yeah, they've put a story out and aimed at children with a children's book about white privilege, which is, again, propagandizing this idea that white people are bad and are responsible for everything that's gone wrong in the world. And it goes along with this idea that there's this systemic racism in this country and all the other countries in the West. And this is something that just simply shouldn't be propagandized to children. Children should be made to feel proud of their country. country. I mean, no one would say to an African child in Africa, you have black privilege and therefore you need to hate your country, criticize your country, criticize your history, or Chinese children in China. No one would say to them, you've got Chinese privilege. But it seems to me that in Western countries, there's this whole class of people in education, in the media, that are continually pushing this narrative that white privilege, white supremacy is responsible for everything that's wrong, going back to slavery. And slavery was bad for a 150-year period in our past, absolutely. But we've done some wonderful things as a country, and we were the first country in the world to abolish slavery, and not just in our own country. The Royal Navy spent 100 years in the 19th century going around and abolishing slavery in France, in Arabia, in Turkey, in Spain and Portugal as well. So those are the kind of things that I think should be taught to children about how good our country is, and not just perpetuating this narrative that white people are racist, white people are bad, and we should be ashamed of our country. It's totally wrong.
Susan, what do you make of this story? Should primary school children be taught about white privilege?
I think they should definitely be taught about racism. I think it's a good thing to have other experiences explained to children, obviously. That is a very important thing. I think the tone that is used and how it's done does need looking at, particularly in this case, perhaps. But, I mean, I think we could get kind of overexcited about the story that has been put out there. The Professor of Black Studies at Birmingham City University once claimed that the Queen was the world's #1 symbol of white supremacy. But it doesn't say that's actually what was being accessed in the newsround piece that we're talking about.
And he wouldn't have said that the Empire was worse than the Nazis.
Yeah, I mean, that is something that is... But what they're actually kind of talking about to try and explain... What they've tried to do, I think, and perhaps it is in a kind of very heavy-handed way, is talk about what white privilege, if you hear that phrase, what it means. So I think in some ways explanations are not a bad thing, but it depends on how you frame it.
All right, Suze, so you're from the West Country. I'm from Nottingham.
West Midlands.
Yeah, West Midlands,
yeah.
right. I'm from Nottingham. We're both white. We both grew up working class. When did our white privilege kick in? Because I don't remember it. When was the moment?
Well, that's the problem. But we're not the people you ask about,
that,
are we?
Well, my point is, this is made up.
But we're not the people. I mean, I'm not going to defend somebody kind of using white supremacy or white privilege in a piece to children. But at the same time, I know I'm not the person to defend or advocate for it, because I am white, and it does take sometimes other people to reflect their experiences to you in the learning process. That's all I'd say about that.
Right, we've got 2 minutes left here, so I wanted to touch on the comments from Steve Coogan on a podcast recently. It kind of ties in with what we're talking about now. He's dismissed fans of the royal family as flag-waving idiots. Susan, tell us a bit more.
Yes, he did do this. He was on a podcast, and he does like to be kind of controversial. But, I mean, I will try to do my best to defend Steve on this, because I know people will be shouting at the television that Steve Coogan's come out with something like this. He's kind of trying to speak up for working people. He says he thinks they're flag-waving people who are kind of idiots, because people who kind of support the royal family are a power structure that keep a foot on the throat of working-class people. He's trying to be a champion of the people. But he also said that he finds it hard to kind of kick them too much, because he does like Duchy Originals and the biscuits that Prince Charles makes. And I think sometimes we do have to remember that Steve Coogan is a comedian. I mean, opinion may be torn on that, but he is a comedian. He's a very fine actor, and he's just come out with things that obviously have made some headlines in a podcast.
David, you've got a flag behind you there, and I'm assuming that you love the royal family. Does that mean that you're an idiot in Steve Coogan's eyes?
Well, I think he would say that I'm an idiot, wouldn't he? Look, I love my country. I'm the royal family that is part of our constitution. The monarch is the centre of our constitution. So this goes back historically, and it's a very good constitution. I mean, I am no fan of some individual members in the royal family, I have to say that, but they're there. And I think if people want to support them and they want to wave a flag, that's fantastic, and it shows patriotism. But, the idea that Steve Coogan is representing the working class is just laughable. He's a multi-millionaire, he's an actor, he's a lovey, and he's very funny. I like what he does, but I think he should stick to acting and stick to entertainment and not involve himself in politics, and certainly not in a way which would disparage a lot of people who are proud of their country and like to wave a flag like I do.
And David, do you think people in this country generally are afraid of waving flags and being patriotic?
I don't think they are on the streets in the working class. Once you get outside central London, and there is a lot of pressure there among the establishment media class to actually disparage our nation. And the English flag, for example, it's been made synonymous with hooliganism, and they call it far right, and they call even showing the Union Jack far right at times, which is absolutely outrageous. But I think among the ordinary people, they just don't care. And you see when there's celebrations, the coronation last week, everyone was putting up bunting all over the place. So people don't care about what they're being told by the nation-hating establishment.
Suze, we've got 20 seconds. What do you think of that?
I think he's absolutely right. I think if you give the British public an occasion, they'll take to the streets with their flags, and it's lovely to see, as we did with the coronation.
Yeah, and wasn't that a wonderful sight?
Yeah. I wish I had a flag to wave now. Thanks, guys. Susan, David, marvellous. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And let us know your views on any of those stories that we've just touched upon. I'm sure you're going to have an opinion on those. gbviews@gbnews.com.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Good morning, it's 7 o'clock on Friday, the 27th of October. Today, a massive challenge for the Home Office as attempts to clear the backlog in the asylum system could risk creating new delays. That's according to a new damning report by MPs. Does the government have the will and the ability to deal with more than 67,000 undecided cases? Olivia Utley will have more.
As a talk.
The Immigration Minister has promised to close down migrant hotels over the next 6 months, but with the asylum backlog showing no signs of lessening, will he be able to stick to his word?
As a Tory MP reveals he was arrested on suspicion of rape, the number of Conservatives embroiled in sexual misconduct allegations grows to a total of 9. How damaging will this be to the party already on a back foot? We'll have all the latest.
As Israel gears up for a full ground invasion and the West throws its weight behind them, Vladimir Putin wades into the conflict, inviting senior Hamas and Iranian leaders to Moscow for talks. Mark White has all the latest.
Comes as the Israeli forces have launched another ground raid into central Gaza, targeting Hamas positions.
And as GB News Breakfast learns that there have been high-level government discussions about hosting Palestinian refugees in the UK, we'll be debating whether the UK should introduce a similar scheme like the one used for Ukrainians. That's in just under half an hour's time.
The The annual Poppy Appeal launches across the UK, and we've been in Leeds speaking to veterans about how important Remembrance is for them. We'll bring you that report from Anna Riley.
And with Britain's water facing scandal after scandal, we'll be quizzing the Shadow Environment Secretary, Steve Reed, on what Labour would do to clean up our waters. That's coming up in just a moment.
And Alex Burkle will have your latest weather for you.
Good morning. Watch out for some fog first thing this morning, but that will clear and then it's showers or longer spells of rain for many. I'll have more details later.
And a big welcome to the newest member of the Breakfast family, Ashley. She's going to be here with all the sport a little bit later on.
I'm Martin Dordney.
I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News. Good morning to you, and thank you so much for your company. Now, to our top story today, the asylum backlog that refuses to go away. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak pledged the Home Office would clear a huge number of asylum claims by the end of this year. Well, it seems so far he is nowhere near delivering.
The hope was to ease overcrowding in migrant detention centres and save the taxpayer money on hotels. And that's £8 million a day at the moment. They're holding thousands of people seeking asylum. A report by a cross-party committee says a huge challenge remains for the Home Office, and the government's plan to reform the asylum system to speed the process up is, quote, incomplete and unrealistic.
For more on this and other news from Westminster, we're joined now by our political correspondent, Olivia Utley. Good morning to you, Olivia. Well, it looks as though this promise from the government, according to this report, can't actually be fulfilled.
Well, exactly. This is another headache for the government. On Wednesday, it looked as though the government was making strides ahead in its plan to close these migrant hotels, which are currently housing 50,000 migrants, 400 hotels housing 50,000 migrants at a cost of £8 million per day to the taxpayer. Obviously, this is a deeply, deeply unpopular policy, and the Conservative polling shows that the Conservatives are likely to hemorrhage votes in key seats if these hotels stay open. Well, on Wednesday, Robert Jenrick said that he was going to start closing these hotels. He said that come January, 50 of those hotels would be closed, and 3 months later, another 50 would be closed. He said that that would be possible because the asylum backlog is shrinking. He said that Rishi Sunak and the Suella Braverman have managed to halve the asylum backlog over the course of this year. Well, this report that's come out today, damning report, suggests that that isn't quite true. Yes, the asylum backlog, which Robert Jenrick seems to count as old cases from before June 2022, yes, those numbers have gone down. But obviously, while those asylum claims are being processed, more migrants have come in across the channel. And actually, if anything, it looks as though the whole asylum backlog, taking in cases from after June 2022, has gone up. So how on earth are the Conservatives going to start closing these hotels? Now, of course, the obvious answer is to make sure that these asylum claims are processed quicker. At the moment, it takes on average 435 days for an asylum claim to be processed, which is creating an enormous bottleneck, as you can imagine. Labour has said that it would simply hire another 1,000 caseworkers at the Home Office to go through these claims and get them processed quicker. But it is a mountain of a task. Over this year, the Home Office has increased its capacity to process asylum claims. At the beginning of the year, 400 claims were processed a week. It's now 4,500. But even with that huge increase in capabilities, that asylum backlog is just going up. So how on earth is Robert Jenrick going to manage to close these hotels? And if he goes back on his word, what sort of an impact is that going to have on the Conservatives in the run-up to the next election?
OK, Olivia, thanks for that. Please stick with us. But we're joined now by the leader of the Heritage Party, David Curtin. Hello to you again, David. So clearing the backlog is the answer. It sounds like the kind of thing the Labour Party would like to do. But do you think that's the answer? After all, we have one of the highest application acceptance rates in all of Europe, over 70%. Surely clearing the backlog would just lead to an increase in asylum being granted to stay in the UK.
Yeah, well, that's the problem, isn't it? You can clear the backlog, but if you're going to let 70 people stay in the country, then that isn't going to take any pressure off accommodation, either in hotels to begin with, or later on in the council housing, the private rented sector, which is now chock-a-block with people that have come in who are seeking asylum, who have been given asylum, and that's having a knock-on effect on the housing market. So, yeah, the answer is that you need to stop the backlog from happening in the first place. That should have been done because the Conservatives have been in power for 13 years. They've got no excuses. But now it's there. You do have to get rid of the backlog. But they're being very duplicitous in the numbers. I mean, they've seemed to have divided it up into two, these pre-June 22 cases, and they're saying, oh, we're clearing that. But as Olivia said, they're increasing the number of asylum seekers coming after that is increasing. So the total number is going up. Well, what we need to do, as I've said for a very long time, is push the boats coming from France back to France. Anyone coming from a safe country like France or Belgium or the Netherlands should immediately, automatically not be given asylum because clearly they are not in imminent danger. So we need to do that. And we also need to reduce legal immigration as well, which is another big problem.
But this is the issue, isn't it, David? Because when you talk about pushing back the boats, you're then facing the huge legal issues that we see in the courts time and time again of the human rights lawyers then getting involved. Simply wouldn't be able to push back the boats. No flights have taken off to Rwanda for exactly the same reason. The human rights lawyers are getting involved again. Is there an issue, do you think, with the legal processes in this country where they get involved in what the government is trying to achieve?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's another thing that the report says, that if you do reduce the backlog, then it just goes into another part of the system. It goes into the courts because you've got human rights lawyers where will take on the cases of almost every single asylum seeker to appeal against any decision to deport them, and then the deportations just simply aren't taking place. I mean, the government last year, I think, forcefully deported just about 3,000 people, which is, nothing compared to the 175,000 people in the backlog. So, yeah, we do have an issue. And there's other things that need to be done politically. We need to come out of the European Convention on Human Rights, which doesn't actually do anything to enhance the human rights of normal citizens in this country. We've got all the rights that we need from law going back centuries. But what that does is it allows human rights lawyers to advocate on behalf of people who are really playing the system, the asylum system. So we need to come out of that so that we can actually deport people when they have their asylum applications refused.
OK, David Curtin, leader of the Heritage Party. We're going to have to leave it there. Thanks for joining us again this morning. Superb as ever.
Well, the senior Conservative MP, Crispin Blunt, was arrested on suspicion of rape and possession of drugs. Crispin Blunt, who has since been suspended by the party, made a statement after Surrey police said a man in his 60s had been arrested on Wednesday and later released on bail. Well, Olivia Utley is still with us in Westminster. Very good to see you, Olivia. And please do give us the latest on this developing story.
Well, yes, this is a really shocking story. A Conservative MP has been arrested for rape. Crispin Blunt strongly denies the accusations, and he made the unprecedented step of tweeting yesterday, making it clear that the MP who had been arrested was him. Now, this is the statement that he tweeted. It's been reported that an MP was arrested yesterday in connection with an allegation of rape. I am confirming that MP was me. The fact of the arrest requires a formal notification of the Speaker and then my Chief Whip. I have now been interviewed twice in connection with this incident, the first time 3 weeks ago when I initially reported my concern over extortion. The second time was earlier this morning under caution following arrest. The arrest was unnecessary as I remain ready to cooperate fully with the investigation, and I am confident will end without charge. I do not intend to say anything further on this matter until the police have completed their inquiries. So it's a punchy statement from Crispin Blunt there. He is sure that this this police investigation, will not end in a conviction. But even so, this is very difficult for the Prime Minister. There are currently 9 Conservative MPs either facing allegations of sexual misconduct, either within the police system or within the House of Commons system, or else actually charged and convicted with sexual assault. Both Imran Khan and Charlie Elphicke, two former Conservative MPs, are now serving prison sentences. Now, of course, the last thing that Rishi Sunak wants is another by-election. He lost those two by-elections, Mid-Bedfordshire and Tamworth, in spectacular style last week, with Labour overturning unprecedented Conservative majorities. Crispin Blunt has had the whip suspended, so he is still sitting as an MP. But obviously, if this case gets any further, then he could well end up losing the whip, triggering a recall petition where it would go back to his constituents and they could decide whether or not they wanted a by-election, and potentially yet another by-election. Now, his seat in Reigate in Surrey is by normal standards a very, very safe seat, but these days no Conservative seat is safe at all. It's obviously a massive headache for Rishi Sunak, and obviously very, very troubling for whoever the victim was, or potential alleged victim was, who came forward in connection with this event.
Olivia, we have a resurgent Labour Party wearing all the clothes of Blairism. We have a Conservative Party mired in sleaze, echoes of the end of the John Major era and the 1990s. How damaging do you think these allegations are going to be towards the Conservative Party, the misconduct allegations, as we head towards the next general election?
Well, I suppose the Conservatives can hardly sink any lower in the polls. At the moment, there is an enormous gulf between Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer. 19 points, as the GB News poll put it yesterday. Will this do any more damage? Hard to say at this stage, but it's unlikely to help the Conservative cause.
OK, Olivia Utley for us in Westminster. Thank you very much. Let's stick in Westminster, shall we? We'll speak now to the Shadow Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, Steve Reid. Good morning to you, Steve. Always very good to see you on the programme. Thank you for joining us today. And we know you're here to talk about the Flood Resilience Task Force. We'll be talking to you about that in just a few moments. But I did want to start with this growing rift in your party over Israel, Gaza and the conflict there. Nearly a quarter of Labour MPs have now called for a ceasefire in Gaza. That's directly in conflict with the leader of your party, Sir Keir Starmer, completely contrary to the party's official line. We've been on resignation watch from the shadow cabinet, and there's thoughts with around 30 seats around the country with strong Muslim voting populations. One source in the papers today saying this could be the difference between a majority and a hung parliament. This is a real issue for the Labour Party, isn't it?
Well, good morning, and thank you for having me on your show, as always. Now, the situation in the Middle East is incredibly difficult for everyone. I mean, nobody watching the kind of scenes that we see on your shows and many others can feel anything other than heartbroken at the loss of life that is going on. Now, the situation there, the immediate crisis, was triggered by an attack by Hamas terrorists breaking into Israel and slaughtering innocent citizens. It was the worst slaughter of Jewish people since the Holocaust, the worst attack in Israel's entire existence. Now, Israel, like any other state experiencing an attack like that, will need to defend itself, and that means dismantling the terrorist infrastructure that allowed that attack to happen so it cannot happen again. But it's important that Israel's response is in line with international law and, as far as possible, protects civilian life. Now, the reason so many civilians are in danger in Gaza is because Hamas, the terrorist organisation that attacked Israel, have placed their weapons and their infrastructure in densely populated areas, including under hospitals and under schools. They didn't do that because they want to protect Palestinian lives. They did that because they don't care about Palestinian lives. Now, Labour is calling on Israel to follow international law in doing what they need to do to dismantle that terrorist infrastructure. But at the same time, we're calling on the government to do more to provide support to Palestinians innocent Palestinians who are suffering in Gaza right now. So we're calling for a humanitarian pause to allow that aid and support to come in that can help people. That includes food, water, medicines and fuel, and it includes switching the electricity back on right now because the hospitals are a day or so away from running out of electricity, and that will further disable them from providing the support that many, many wholly innocent Palestinians need to be receiving right now.
Yeah, Steve, but you see, to a lot of people, this just seems like another U-turn from Sir Keir Starmer. First, he stood with Israel. Now he's kind of bowing to a revolt within your party from Muslim MPs and councillors. In fact, a councillor for Bradford, Taj Salam, told GB News yesterday that Keir Starmer had endorsed a genocide and he was gagging people within the party. But of course, the Labour Party is hugely reliant on Muslim votes to carry that majority you so desperately need. So where are you going to go? Because at the moment it seems once again Sir Keir Starmer is just sat on the fence.
This isn't about courting votes right now. This is about doing the right thing in an incredibly volatile situation in the Middle East. And Keir Starmer has been consistent all the way through that Israel must follow international law as it takes action to defend its civilians and dismantle the terrorist infrastructure that led to this. He's been absolutely consistent about that all the way through. Now, as the situation in Gaza is getting worse, it's quite right that Labour, Keir Starmer and the rest of us have called for a humanitarian pause to allow those aid convoys to get in. There have been a few trucks gone through already, but it's nothing compared to what is needed. So it's quite right, as the US administration in Washington has said as well, we need that humanitarian pause to allow that aid to come in. But it is important that Israel, as any other state would do, the UK, the US, any of us that were attacked in the way that Israel was attacked, would need to dismantle the terrorist infrastructure and capability that led to that incursion and the horrific loss of life in Israel. What's happening now is the fault of Hamas, not of Israel. The Israeli government will need to defend itself and dismantle that infrastructure, but they must follow international law in doing that. And right now, we're all seeing the humanitarian crisis unfolding in front of our eyes on our screens in Gaza. We need that pause for the aid and the support to get through to help people who desperately need it right now.
OK, Mr Reid, I wanted to ask you about the asylum backlog that a damning new report by MPs has highlighted this morning. 67,000 people in that processing queue as of June last year. That number has grown since then. 430 days is the average time it takes for an asylum seeker to be processed through the system. It's a huge backlog. It's only growing. How would the Labour Party fix it?
Well, this government's completely lost control of the asylum system, haven't they? It's taking an immense amount of time to deal with individual cases, and while those cases are while people are waiting for their cases to be dealt with, they're being put up in hotels at a staggering cost of £8 million a day. It's shocking. What Labour would do is, instead of using that money on hotel bills, we would use it to recruit 1,000 additional civil servants to deal with these cases faster. That would reduce the hotel bill, the scheme would pay for itself, and then you would get the cases processed much faster. Beyond that, another thing that the Conservative government is doing is, even in those cases that they have made a determination, people who they identify as safe as safe to be removed to a third country are not being removed. I saw a figure recently, 16,000 people had been identified as safe for removal to a third country, but out of that 16,000, only 21 had actually been removed. Now, if people are determined to not have the right to stay here and it's safe to send them back to a third country, then that is where they should go. But whichever way you look at it, this Conservative government has messed up our asylum and immigration system, and it will take a Labour government coming in to put it right again.
OK, Steve, another thing voters really care about. We've seen this week on GB News a lot of viewers losing their homes to floods. Storm Babbitt, of course, hammering the nation. Labour has a flood resilience task force planned. How'd that work? What would it cost and how would you pay for it?
Yeah, well, I was up in. I mean, I've been travelling the country looking at areas that have been affected by these terrible floods that we're seeing everywhere. And I was up in Nottinghamshire and Retford I think it was earlier this week. And what people were telling me there, and the local council was telling me, is that there is not proper coordination of support between national and local government and the emergency services, either to deal with the short-term needs that people have if their homes are being flooded, or the long-term approach to making sure that those floods, if they happen, the water is diverted away from people's homes. So Labour is proposing setting up a floods resilience task force to coordinate between national government, local government and the emergency services and local communities to make sure that the help and support it's needed is available where and when it's needed. But secondly, where there is a need to put in place schemes like floods alleviation, dredging rivers, additional drainage to make the water go away from flooding people's homes, that is actually happening. And one of the things they told me up in Nottinghamshire was £11.7 million has been allocated 2 years ago for that kind of work, but only 50,000 of it had been spent. And as a result of that, I was standing with homeowners who are literally in tears on my shoulder because everything they owned has just been destroyed. Now, a Labour government won't let that happen. We heard Therese Coffey, didn't we, just this week, telling us that the problem was the rain coming from the wrong direction. The problem is a failure of coordination between national and local government, and Labour will put in place a task force to meet every year before the floods happen, before the rains come, to make sure that that support, long-term and short-term, is in place.
OK, Steve Reed, Shadow Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. Very good to have you on the programme. Thank you very much indeed.
OK, a delegation from Hamas visited Moscow yesterday for talks over foreign and Russian hostages being held by the group in Gaza.
The Kremlin, which blames the current crisis on the failure of US diplomacy and wants an immediate ceasefire, has ties to all key players in the region, including Israel, Iran and Palestine.
But the chances of Moscow's attempts to mediate the conflict look low as Israel calls its move an obscene step and Western officials warn of an axis of terror.
Well, it's day 21 of the Israel-Hamas conflict, and EU leaders are calling for a so-called humanitarian pause in fighting between Israel and Hamas to allow aid into Gaza. But they are not asking for a lasting ceasefire.
And they say rapid, safe and unhindered access is needed as 27 EU nations express gravest concern for the humanitarian situation on the ground.
Yes, UN aid agencies say they have begun to significantly reduce their operations in Gaza because they have almost exhausted their fuel reserves.
Meanwhile, Hamas says about 50 hostages being held in Gaza have been killed as a result of Israeli bombing the Strip in retaliation to Hamas's 7th of October attack.
Well, let's cross live now to GB News' security editor, Mark White, who's in Tel Aviv for us this morning. Good morning to you, Mark. And extraordinary scenes, President Putin of Russia inviting Hamas to Moscow.
Well, indeed, Israel and Russia normally have fairly good relations, but it's certainly been damaged by this move by the Russian president, and Israel saying that they find it absolutely disgraceful that these Hamas leaders who've been welcomed by Vladimir Putin have blood on their hands following the massacre of more than 1,400 people on the 7th of October. From Russia's point of view, of course, it wants to see what it can do to try to free its own nationals. There are dual nationals and Russian nationals who are believed to have been held hostage by Hamas as well. So let's see what happens, whether as a gesture following this meeting, Hamas actually does release some more hostages. But as I say, Israel and indeed Western allies very angry at this development. In terms of developments overnight, we've had a raid that has been carried out by the Israel Defense Forces into central Gaza. Images released by the IDF show tanks, bulldozers being used again to cross and demolish that border fence to get into Gaza. These are targeted raids aimed at trying to clear the way for the eventual ground invasion. And the IDF say that a number of Hamas targets were taken out, including anti-tank missile positions. Now, this raid came just following a day of intense activity in central Israel with rocket attacks here in Tel Aviv. 4 separate attacks just in the past 24 hours, 3 yesterday alone. We had to go for the air raid shelter twice during those attacks targeting Tel Aviv. There's images that have been released showing multiple interceptions by Israel's Iron Dome missile defense system of the rockets, but despite that, 2 rockets did get through in the last day, striking apartment blocks and injuring 4 people.
OK, Mark White, thanks for that update from Tel Aviv.
Now, should the UK be taking in Palestinian refugees? We'll be debating that next, so do stay with us.
This is GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the dinosaur hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these 3.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us. From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Welcome back. It's 7:29. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and Ellie.
Now, GB News Breakfast has learnt there have been high-level discussions between government officials and humanitarian charities about hosting Palestinian refugees with UK families. For now, we believe the government is reluctant to adopt a similar scheme used for Ukrainians. But we're asking the question today, should the UK host Palestinian refugees? Well, joining us now is journalist and activist Jennifer Nadal and former Brexit Party MEP Ben Habib. Very good to see you both this morning. Thank you so much for your company. And this is going to be a really interesting debate because, Jennifer, you are Jewish, but you do think that the UK should host Palestinian refugees, whereas Ben Habib, you are Muslim, aren't you? But you don't think that the UK should take in Palestinian refugees.
Well, my father's Muslim, yeah.
I think this is going to be really, really interesting. Jennifer, let's start with you, shall we?
My father's Muslim.
Why do you think we should be bringing in Palestinian refugees?
The first thing, if I can just clarify, my father was Jewish and he came as a child refugee to the UK. He was taken in by strangers, and I wouldn't be alive today if strangers in Britain hadn't provided a home and a safe place for my 14-year-old father. The idea behind this scheme is that we simply offer mothers and children somewhere safe to go while this conflict continues. It's individuals like me who will be offering their homes to host those who are able to come. And it's the very least we can do. We are watching a horror of an unprecedented scale unfold in the most densely populated area in the world. And half the population on the Gaza Strip is children. And it's our moral, our humanitarian and our ethical duty to reach out our hands and offer, those of us who can offer homes to those who would otherwise be trapped in the most terrible circumstances.
OK, Ben, you are of Muslim heritage. What do you make of what Jennifer's saying there, that it is our ethical duty, if we can, to offer our homes to people in need?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that, practically speaking, it's not a proposition that can be enacted, because the only way out of Gaza at the moment is through the Rafah border, which, in fact, is being blockaded by Egypt, a neighboring Muslim country. And they don't want people coming out of Gaza, because the last time their border was penetrated, tens of thousands of people in 2008, tens of thousands of Palestinians from Gaza came into Egypt. And since then, actually, Egypt has reinforced its border dramatically. And they're the ones who are restricting not just people coming out, but aid going into Gaza at the moment. Which brings me on to my second point, and that there are 23 Arab countries in and around Gaza that are not reaching out to assist Palestinians in Gaza. And there's a reason for that. The vast majority of Arab states are sick and tired of the conflict being promoted by Hamas and through Gaza. And Jordan, Egypt, the UAE, others, including Saudi Arabia, which was on the verge of reaching a deal with the US to recognize Israel, which would have resulted in quite a substantial shift of power in favor of Saudi away from Iran, are not reaching out to the Palestinians. And it's really incumbent on the 23 Arab nations surrounding the locality, first of all, to deal with their own local problem. It's not for the United Kingdom. Then the third thing I think that people really need to take on board is that Hamas is a terrorist organization that has been governing Gaza for the last 17 years. It has educated Palestinians in Gaza. It has inculcated in them the hostile views that they have to the West, which is nothing short of, as far as Israel is concerned, its total destruction. And if we were to take in Palestinians from Gaza, there is a very real risk that they will come to the United Kingdom with great antipathy in their hearts, discontent, and like we've seen with many others who've come across to the United Kingdom, that actually they do damage to the UK. So as much as I applaud Jennifer for her humanitarian call to arms, it's not a practical proposition right now. And even if it were practical, I would caution very greatly against it, given the influence that Hamas has had on Palestinians in the region for the last 17 years.
Jennifer, let's bring you back in at that stage. I mean, the government does align itself with Israel. It's been strong in its stance that Israel has a right to defend itself. And in that sense, they are supporting the airstrikes on Gaza. Would you agree with that sense from Ben Habib that it perhaps then isn't our place to take in Palestinian refugees, that it should go to the neighbours of Gaza, to the likes of Egypt, where the Rafah crossing is the only other border with the Gaza Strip? Should they be going to Qatar or Saudi Arabia?
So if I can start by just making clear, we are talking about children. We are talking about defenceless children, and we are talking about their mothers. We're not talking about giving a refuge to Hamas, and to conflate the two is really, really damaging and just not helpful. Anyone who is offered refuge in this country is going to feel nothing but gratitude. And you know, what I would say to Ben is that if you were walking past a pond and saw a child drowning in it and looked and saw that that child was from an Arab nation, would you say, well, I'm not going to pull that child out of the pond because they have a different coloured skin from me, or there must be an Arab person around who can pull them out? I mean, it's the most terrible logic. This is our duty. We are not talking about giving refuge to anyone who's dangerous. We're not talking about not having screening procedures. We are talking about children who at the moment are trapped in a shooting gallery. Ben, I heard your point that in practical terms, at the moment, no one can get out. So this is a theoretical request at the moment, but what it means is that we can get ready for the moment when people can come out. And we're not talking about great numbers. We're talking initially about 1,000 children, and we've already had an influx of families offering to open their homes to those children and their mothers. So we're not asking local government to intervene. We are just saying those of us who are able and willing to offer refuge to a child who would otherwise be trapped in the most horrific circumstances, that we should be allowed to do so. So I think it's very easy to put this into a bucket and to use the normal dog whistle language which is used around these issues, which is that anyone who comes from Gaza could be a dangerous terrorist and therefore we mustn't let them here. And furthermore, it's not our job to be humanitarian because there are others who can do it for us. In a situation like this, I just think we all have to ask ourselves, what would we want done if these were our children that were trapped and being killed, being traumatized, being injured, having buildings collapse around them, having their schools destroyed, having hospitals bombed? What would we want? We would reach out to them and we would say, come here and let us look after you until you are safe. And all of us who've seen the scenes unfold on television, the terrible, catastrophic scenes of collapsed building, of people buried alive, would want to make some kind of intervention and be of some use to those particularly children who by an accident of birth have been born into this terrible, terrible situation. You know, we're lucky here sitting in the studio. We are so lucky. We do not know what a conflict like that looks like or feels like. We are safe, and it's incumbent on us to help those that we can.
Ben Habib, what Jennifer is essentially saying there is, where is our humanity? And on a practical note, why couldn't we have something like a Ukrainian scheme where we're allowing in women and children with proper screening in place? Who would we be to stop people who are willing and able to house these refugees?
Well, just picking up on a couple of things Jennifer said, and without wishing to undermine in any sense the appeal to arms that she made for humanitarian response. But I'm not conflating Palestinians with Hamas. What I'm saying is that Hamas has been in charge of Gaza for the last 17 years. It is responsible for the education of these children that Jennifer would take in. And they have been putting out their ideology, their anti-Western terroristic ideology, embedding it in the people of Gaza. The notion that women and children coming across the UK, many of whom presumably would be teenagers, won't have antipathy to us as they enter the country is, I'm afraid, not realistic. They've been educated into despising the West, despising our values, wishing to obliterate Israel. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, it's not just a matter of technicality. that the Egyptian border is closed. The Egyptians have closed their border because they fear what would happen to Egypt if they let these people in. And it's because they know there are risks from these refugees coming into Egypt.
Okay.
There's a reason why 23 Arab nations are not reaching out to reaching out to the Palestinians in Gaza, because they fear it. And we should go tread very, very carefully in our approach.
Okay.
Remember, just to reiterate, Hamas is a terrorist organization. It has been educating these people for the last 17 years.
Ben Habib, thank you very much, the former Brexit Party MEP, and Jennifer Nadal, journalist and activist. Thank you very much, both of you, for your time this morning. You will have a view on that at home. Do let us know what it is. gbviews@gbnews.com.
OK, now moving on. It's time to go through all the latest sports with news broadcaster and our newbie today, Ashley Wilmot. Ashley, great to see you again. I'm going to get your team out of you before the day is out. But before that, let's talk about the football action last night. Big night in the Europa League.
Yes.
Bad news for the Hammers, but good news for Liverpool.
Yeah, Hammers didn't have a great result. They lost 2-1 to Olympiacos. But Liverpool, they've probably woken up with some sore heads today after that fantastic win against Toulouse, a 5-1 victory. They've now won 3 out of 3 in the group stage. Toulouse did give a good account of themselves, but ultimately they just did not compare with Liverpool's quality, with their flair. They've been able to utilise their whole squad, and Jurgen Klopp's probably really pleased with the fact that he has all those options.
He'll be chuffed, won't he? Yeah. And Brighton, they're doing well. They've made history.
They have indeed. I'm really pleased with Brighton. A 2-0 win against Ajax. Now, like you say, they've won their first game in the European competition. And not only that, they've beaten the 4-time European champion. So they've kept their knockout stage dreams alive. They'll be really pleased with that. Although, to be honest, they were playing walking football for a lot of it. So, yeah, I mean, good result for them. But Ajax, don't know what's happening to them at the moment.
Yeah, it'd be good news if Jurgen Klopp finally starts banging on about that offside decision against Spurs. Maybe this 5-1 victory will help with that. Can we talk a little bit about the cricket quickly? Because it was painful, it was traumatic, but England are really, really going through a bad time.
Yeah, look, the cricket, we mentioned it in the last hour, one of their worst performances. I'm not really sure how they're going to recover from that, to be honest. It's their 4th defeat in 5 games. It's looking like it's all over, and they face the host India on Sunday. So they're unbeaten. They are on to win, basically. So I don't know. It's not looking very good.
No, it's bad time to be a cricket fan. Let's look ahead to tonight, shall we? And league leaders Tottenham, they're travelling to Crystal Palace.
There is so much to look forward to this evening, and Spurs fans everywhere are hailing Ange Postecoglou. He's obviously started this season and is on brilliant form. They haven't lost a game yet. If they win tonight, they'll be 5 points clear. They're coming off a fantastic 2-0 victory to Fulham, which happened on Monday. Crystal Palace coming off a 4-0 defeat to Newcastle United, but they've had a little bit more recovery time because their game was on Saturday. But what I loved about this is this week, both the managers were praising each other in the press conference. Obviously, Roy Hodgson's had a fantastic career, as is Ange currently having, and Ange was just praising him. And when a journalist stepped in and said, Roy's 76, Ange. When you get to that age, do you think you're still going to be managing a football club? And do you want to know what his answer was?
Go on.
He says, I think I'll be on a Greek island.
Oh, good for him.
I don't blame him.
I like him. He doesn't criticise anyone. He just seems to be a nice guy.
Yeah,
It's
like,
obviously paying off well. Yeah, it's paying off well for Tottenham, though, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Now, Ashley, obviously Spurs aren't missing Harry Kane. Have you got anything for me on Nottingham Forest?
Oh, no, sorry.
The answer
You
is no.
can't just put her on the spot like that on her first day.
Exactly.
I knew the answer. I knew the answer would be a no. I'm trying to bed you in for the fact that I'm obsessed with Forest. Any excuse? Sorry.
I'm sorry.
But I am a Spurs fan. So do you reckon they are title contenders this season, or is it too early to say?
It probably is too early to say. You know, it's 38 games in a season. They've played 9. This will be their 10th game tonight. But they're on good form. They're on to a winner. Spurs fan will definitely be hoping that they will be in for a chance at the title. So keep your fingers crossed, because they haven't won a title in the Premier League era. So who knows?
Super.
Fingers crossed. It's looking good anyway with Ange. Thank you very much, Ashley. Really good to see you. Now, coming up for you on GB News Breakfast, the Beatles are set to release new music as AI wizardry unites the Fab Four.
It really is superb, that is, and you can find out more about that next on Headline Makers.
in a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m. Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Welcome back. You are watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and Ellie.
And you want us to go through some of today's big headlines now? Is the author and journalist Susan Holder and the broadcaster and lawyer Andrew Eborn. Good morning to you both again. Susan, let's start with a bit of showbiz. Well, it's not just showbiz, it's The Crown
well, that's
is returning.
The thing, you see.
Everybody's talking about Lady Diana's performance.
Yes, so basically that is the problem. It's gone showbiz in as much as they're rewriting history, aren't they? Now, I loved The Crown. I watched the first few series. I stopped watching it when it started to get, I felt, into the more modern-day royals, the ones who are alive now, the ones who actually have to, you know, kind of go out in the world and do their jobs, while The Crown actually is rewriting history. Now, I'm a writer, and I've written about real people in my book sometimes. I actually wrote a book that involved Paul McCartney, and I felt so kind of responsible about that. I emailed Paul McCartney to tell him what I'd written about and told him that I'd like done it with respect and whatever, and he replied and said that was all good.
You got Paul McCartney's email address?
Well, I knew somebody who had it, and I sent him an email, and then the next day he replied and said, this sounds fab. But I just felt a responsibility as a writer that I was writing about somebody who was out there in the real world and who lived. And actually, I think you've got to be very careful. And what they've got in the new series coming up, they've obviously got to the Diana point in the story, and they've had her come back as a ghost and stand behind the Queen, played by Imelda Staunton, and the Queen apparently says to her, it's nothing short of a revolution that you've started, and the Princess replies, that was never my intention. Now, did she do that? No, we know she didn't, because Diana did not come back and talk to the Queen as a ghost, and I don't think the Queen stood in the mirror talking to Diana as a ghost. And if we're starting to do things like that, I think we're playing with history, and people will believe, and obviously may not believe that scene, but all the words they put into people's mouths.
It's a drama, it's artistic licence.
Is it artistic licence when we're talking about historical things? I think drama has a very, very useful point of helping us understand the world we're in. I actually wasn't sure about the whole Savile documentary that we were talking about, Steve Coogan, earlier. I did watch it. I actually thought it did have a point. It did have a useful way of getting that story over. It was done very responsibly, I felt. You have to take a line on that, I think. OK, Andrew, what do you make of this?
I'll tell you what the problem is that you're mixing what's supposed to be a brilliant drama, which is what it is, historical fact with fiction. And I've had the pleasure of interviewing with Paul McCartney and various others, but also Charles Spencer, Diana's brother. And basically, the biggest problem that they have is exactly that. It's a fantastic series, but as soon as you start blurring it, that's when it devalues it. So I'm against it on that sort of principle. I think keep to the actual facts, because the facts are pretty stunning themselves.
Now, that moves nicely on. Talking about bringing things back to life, the Beatles' new music, Andrew. I'm incredibly excited about this. I heard the original demo tape. It's from the same session as Free as a Bird. I think this is going to be an amazing thing to bring the Beatles back to life. Tell us more.
Absolutely. As you know, I'm a futurist, back to the futurist, so I speak around the world about the joys of artificial intelligence. Beatles get back to the future. So what's happened is they've found this old recording of John Lennon, and they're going to basically take his voice, and it's going to be released next week, and it's going to be the very last single of the Beatles. And what it does, it shows the fantastic use of this sort of technology, where you can recreate and basically enhance those sort of things accordingly.
I think they're using the word artificial intelligence, though, is worrying people, because they're thinking they've recreated John's voice, and that isn't what they've done at all. It's really John Lennon. It was a recording found by his widow, Yoko Ono, and handed on a tape labelled for Paul, to Paul McCartney. And now they've got the technology good enough. I mean, you know, pulling people's voices out on strands isn't a new form of thing in music, but this technology has helped us to get the proper
And you're absolutely right.
quality.
Actually, it was a lot of things. It was Peter Jackson who did that brilliant sort of series where they're recreating, dusting off all these old recordings and enhancing them. So really, really exciting. We're going to see more of this, I can tell you. We're also going to see people being digitally resurrected. There'll be concerts with holograms and various other things.
That's a whole other conversation.
This absolutely.
Look, we've got some breaking news coming in the past few moments from the UK's FCA, who say we are reviewing how NatWest Groups and Coutts governance systems and controls are working to identify and address any significant shortcomings. This is in response to the Nigel Farage debanking scandal. And Nigel Farage has responded to the FCA's report. It has identified potential regulatory breaches in NatWest's handling of a decision to close the former Brexit Party leader Nigel Farage's accounts. Nigel Farage has said that the report has whitewashed the decision to close his accounts at Coutts Bank and was a very mealy-mouthed approach to this complex issue. So we have our wonderful panel with us now, Andrew Eborn and Susan Holder. What's your response to this? Susan, let's start with you.
Well, I mean, I think previous to this, there hasn't been an awful lot I've agreed with Nigel Farage on, but I think he's actually done the country an amazing service by raising this and getting it the profile it has, because who knew that you could have your bank account taken off you? And so many people, other than Nigel Farage, had it happen to them and didn't want to go public on it because they found it actually quite an embarrassing thing, and because it just looks like you don't have enough money in that particular bank account, or it's something quite shameful, which of course it isn't. It is absolutely outrageous that anyone was ever debanked in this way, and we do need proper regulations. Why on earth it had to be brought up and why on earth they had to be told that, I've no idea. But well done to Nigel Farage for bringing it up.
All credit to Nigel for raising this. I have a Coutts bank account, surprise, surprise, they do great leather goods. How they reacted to it was far too slow. We always say that history repeats itself because we don't learn the lessons from history. So it's been a PR disaster for them. And it's quite right, they've come out with this. I think it's taken a bit too long.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just reading through Nigel Farage's statement now, who says the report is inconclusive and ignores the elephant in the room. He says what matters now is the next steps that the FCA, which is the Financial Conduct Authority, the regulator of this industry, does about this scandal. I suppose that's where this goes next, isn't it? It's also what happens. Yeah. How do we stop this from happening again?
And absolutely. And Nigel Farage, luckily for him, had a very good platform on which to raise this and get people. And as soon as he did, you can't find many people who will argue with him on this point. But other people don't have that voice. They don't have that platform. What are they to do? And if your bank just kind of... And nowadays, it's not like you can live on cash. Everything in your life is controlled by the fact that you do need a bank account. It's, in the olden days, quite a lot of people didn't have them. And now that's unthinkable.
Absolutely. And thousands of people came out as a result, and all credit to Nigel for raising that issue.
And the next issue, of course, is the ongoing question around the size of the payout.
Yes, absolutely.
For the departing chief of NatWest, Dame Alison Rose, rumoured to be in the region of 10 or 11 million.
Yes.
I think that's severely in question, though, isn't it, actually? I also think Coots has done this. I mean, the whole private bank, well, there's not anything very private about how they were doing their dealings, were there? I don't know how they can even call themselves that. They should be had under trade descriptions, really.
Well, we will be reacting to this story throughout the day on GB News. Hopefully we can talk to Nigel Farage a little bit later on. We've only got about 20 seconds left. So, Andrew, do you want to tell us in 20 seconds about bed bugs?
Well, I will. The mum has found bed bugs in a Butlin Skeg nest, which is quite extraordinary. And worst of all, this was actually in a gold apartment, so heaven knows what
was going on in silver,
I've just come back from Cannes, where they had a similar sort of problem. Lots of bed bugs everywhere.
Even in Cannes?
I travel, more platforms than Paddington. It's going to be good. But it's everywhere. It's a big issue. We've got some tips we'll tell you later on.
Maybe if we haven't got time now, I'll come back and tell you some tips to get rid of bed bugs. So stay tuned for top tips.
Yeah, stay tuned. It's all here. Susan and Andrew, really good to see you. Do stay with us.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
This time!
Welcome to the dinosaur hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The dinosaur hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm
not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock on Friday, the 27th of October. Today,
a massive challenge for the Home Office as attempts to clear the backlog in the asylum system could risk creating new delays, according to a damning new report by MPs. Does the government have the will and the ability to deal with more than 67,000 undecided cases? Olivia Utley will have more.
The Immigration Minister has promised to close hotels for migrants, but with the asylum backlog showing no signs of decreasing, will he be able to stick to his word?
as a Tory MP reveals he was arrested on suspicion of rape, the number of Conservatives embroiled in sexual misconduct allegation grows to a total of 9. How damaging will this be to a party already on the back foot? We'll have the latest.
And as Israel gears up for a full ground invasion and the West throws its weight behind them, Vladimir Putin wades into the conflict, inviting senior Hamas and Iranian leaders to Moscow for talks. Mark White has all the latest.
Well, overnight in Gaza, there was another significant Israeli ground incursion using tanks and bulldozers and lots of troops. They say they took out a number of Hamas positions.
We don't have enough funding to simply stand still. That's the cry from the organisation representing Britain's councils to the Chancellor. How did local authorities get billion-pound black holes in their budgets? Theo Chkomba will have more.
We'll have the latest from Surrey, where there are concerns that local facilities such as leisure centres will be closing following the bankruptcy of Woking Borough Council.
And as GB News Breakfast learns that there have been high-level government discussions about hosting Palestinian refugees in the UK, we'll be debating if the UK should be tougher on asylum seekers.
The Education Secretary writes again to schools in England, ordering them to let parents see what sex education material is shown to their children. We'll be speaking to her live on the programme later this hour.
And of course, Alex Burker will have all your latest weather forecasts.
Good morning. Watch out for some fog first thing this morning, but that will clear and then it's showers or longer spells of rain for many. I'll have more details later.
And a big warm welcome to the newest member of the Breakfast family. Ashley Wilmot will be here with all the sport. Morning, Ashley.
Morning. How are we?
Yeah, all good. How are you?
Yes, a lot to talk about. We're going to be previewing all the action this evening, including the Lionesses. They're back in action against Belgium, and we'll be joined by Rugby World Cup winner Rachel Burford to preview all the rugby action this weekend.
Ooh, sounds
lovely
exciting.
Stuff. Lovely, lovely. OK, I'm Martin Daubney.
I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Good morning, and to our top story now, the asylum backlog that simply refuses to go away.
Yes, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak pledged that the Home Office would clear a huge number of asylum claims by the end of this year. Well, it seems, so far at least, he's nowhere near delivering that.
Yeah, and the hope was to ease overcrowding in migrant detention centres and save the taxpayer money on hotels. Currently, that's £8 million a day that are holding thousands of people seeking asylum.
Well, a report by a cross-party committee says a huge challenge remains for the Home Office, and the government's plan to reform the asylum system to speed the process up is incomplete and unrealistic.
Well, earlier on Breakfast, we spoke to Shadow Environment Secretary Steve Reed, who told us how Labour plans to deal with this backlog.
Well, this government's completely lost control of the asylum system, haven't they? It's taking an immense amount of time to deal with individual cases, and while those cases are while people are waiting for their cases to be dealt with, they're being put up in hotels at a staggering cost of £8 million a day. It's shocking. What Labour would do is, instead of using that money on hotel bills, we would use it to recruit 1,000 additional civil servants to deal with these cases faster. That would reduce the hotel bill. The scheme would pay for itself, and then you would get the cases processed much faster.
Well, for more on this and other news from Westminster, we're joined now by our political correspondent, Olivia Utley. Good morning to you, Olivia. This is a damning report from MPs, isn't it?
It's a very damning report, and it's going to cause a real headache for the government. The main aim of the government in terms of cracking the migrant problem at the moment is ending the use of hotels for migrants who are waiting their asylum application claims. At the moment, as you mentioned there, the cost of these hotels is £8 million a day. There are 50,000 asylum seekers waiting for their claims to be processed, being held in 400 different hotels across the country. And of course, in those areas, in those 400 areas where these hotels are, they're very, very unpopular with the general public. The hotels themselves are no longer open to ordinary customers, and often that means that businesses can't come and stay in a certain area because the hotels are completely full up with migrants. That has a huge knock-on effect to the economy. Also, there are people who we've heard from on GB News who are worried about their children's safety. If they're a hotel filled with 300 or so young, unaccompanied men, it's not really what you might want next to your children's school. So this is a hugely, hugely unpopular policy which the Conservative government is absolutely desperate to end. And on Wednesday, it looked as though they were on the cusp of doing just that. Robert Jenrick, the Immigration Minister, made a statement in the Commons saying that between January and March, the government would close hotels for migrant use, 50 hotels, and then from March to June they would close another 50. Well, this report out today, this cross-party report, really pours cold water on that. Robert Jenrick said that he would be able to start closing these hotels because government policies aimed at clearing the backlog were working. He said that the backlog has gone down by almost half since the start of the year. This report suggests that that's just simply not true. If you look at Robert Jenrick's figures, what he is talking about is the legacy backlog, as he calls it, the backlog of asylum claims from before 2022. And yes, if you look at that alone, then the cases have halved. But obviously, since June 2022, lots more migrants, thousands and thousands more migrants have come in over the channel, and their claims haven't been processed at all. So the overall figure of the backlog is actually creeping up by the day. Now, what on earth does the government do to fix this? Well, of course, the obvious option is to process asylum claims quicker. At the moment, it takes on average over a year to process an asylum claim. But that's easier said than done. There are a lot of caseworkers in the Home Office already, and employing more seems like a tough ask.
OK, Olivia Utley, superb. Please stick with us. But we're joined now by immigration lawyer Harjap Singh Bangal, friend of the show. Good morning to you, sir. Always a pleasure. So presumably you'll be in favour of plans to reduce the backlog. But I put it to you here. The UK has one of the lowest refusal rates of asylum applications in all of Europe. 70% of those claiming asylum are granted right to remain in the UK. Clearing the backlog will simply lead to more people coming to the UK, won't it?
Well, there is a concern of that because one of the ways the government is trying to cut the backlog down is by issuing a questionnaire. It's going to issue a multi-page questionnaire to the asylum seeker and say, fill this out, send it back to us, and we'll make a decision on your claim. So no face-to-face interviews, no trying to determine face-to-face whether a person is genuine or not. And this is a real concern. That is this going to be a blanket amnesty? A lot of people are concerned for that. And are the government, just by reducing the backlog, actually going to grant people asylum, say, here you go, backlog finished, but then not tell us that 100,000 people have been granted asylum in the UK? So there is a concern for that. There is a way to fast-track claims. Labour used to do it in 14, 15 days. And Labour used to send back 60,000 people a year. But since this government's been in power, since 2011 and 2012, the figures really do not favour them. Less than 3,000 people were forcibly removed last year compared to 60,000 in 2009. And also the backlog is, like your reporter said, slowly creeping up. And the figures are being massaged and spun in a way by the Home Office to the public to make the public feel this government is actually doing something about it. Actually, the figures are going up, the backlogs are going up. Nobody should be waiting a year for a decision which takes half a day to make. It is really concerning. And now all of the MPs have agreed that the Home Office is just not fit for purpose.
The Home Office is not fit for purpose. Perhaps the entire system needs a rethink. I mean, as you just said, 430 days on average for an application for asylum to be considered. That's an awful long time. And then on top of that, this report out today has also found that it risks seeing people in genuine need, genuine asylum seekers, not having their application properly considered. Well, that means that this is a system that's not even fit for purpose, is it?
Yeah, totally right. I mean, a few years ago, the government, in its wisdom, decided to employ gap year students to make decisions. And the level of decision-making was so bad that when these decisions were appealed, 50% of the appeals were overturned, were decided that, hold on, the Home Office had made wrong decisions. So that lengthened the process, put the government into embarrassment and showed that, you know, employing ex-supermarket workers and throwing them in at the deep end or gap year students isn't working. This whole system is like a dilapidated house that needs destroying and building up from the foundations again. Instead, what the government does is paper over the cracks and just presents it as, oh, don't worry, we're okay, this is good enough to be inhabited. But it isn't. The whole system is rotten to its core in the fact that it's not fit enough for purpose from the day a person comes in, or from the day a person tries to cross the channel, through to the day the person receives a decision on their claim. It's absolutely not good, not fit for purpose. This government, without a doubt, has broken that system because the system before this government came into power was effective. The figures tell us that. The best way for the people to gauge what's working and what isn't is to look at the actual figures and compare them. It's not the Human Rights Act. It's not lawyers stopping this. The Human Rights Act has been around and the ECHR has been around for ages. Since 2002, the Human Rights Act have been around. And lawyers have been around before that. Then how come Labour was sending back 60,000 people and processing people in 14 days? I know, I was on the fast-track system in Heathrow in Harmondsworth. A person used to come in on Monday, and by the Wednesday next week, whilst detained, they would have their decision. They even had a court in the detention centre, so if you appealed it, your hearing would get the week after. You wouldn't have to wait a year for the hearing and the backlog. The judge used to sit in the detention centre in a court made there. That's how slick and streamlined it was, but this government has abandoned everything.
Hojab, has something else changed, though? Because when you look back at the number of refusals for asylum, it was 88% refusals in 2004. Now we have a 24% refusal rate, the lowest since 1990, which means 76% of people who apply get the right to remain. So blame the government all we like. But is this actually a mindset of the immigration system which is much more likely to allow a right to remain, and it's actually, in effect, gone soft?
Well, that depends on the government policy and how they treat people coming from each different country. Now, obviously, there's been more wars since then, and there's been people coming from war-torn countries, and you can't send people back. We're currently in the middle of a war now in Palestine. It's Israel. So people are going to be coming over, and you can't send them back. But the fact is, once you're taking 2 years to make a decision, people develop rights here. People develop friends, families, partners, children. In the time it takes for a decision to be made, people can have a kid. And what are you going to say to that kid? That you have to go back as well to a country so they've never been to, they've never been born into. So this is once again the problem of this government has created. The government has created this problem by mismanaging it. It's the signs of a bad boss. And, you know, the employees are not happy, the border staff are not happy, the immigration staff are not happy, being asked to do things that they don't think is ethical or right. The public aren't happy, and the asylum seekers aren't happy they're having to wait for that long for a decision. And, you know, the general voters aren't happy.
OK.
The only people who are trying to say, yeah, we've got it under control, is the actual bad boss and the system. So the figures speak for themselves. Once again, the figures are a product of that system.
OK, Harjit Singh Baghel, excellent analysis. As ever, we have to leave it there. Thanks for joining us on Breakfast.
Now, the senior Conservative MP, Crispin Blunt, was arrested on suspicion of rape and possession of drugs. Crispin Blunt, who has since been suspended by the party, made a statement after Surrey police said a man in his 60s had been arrested on Wednesday and later released on bail. Well, Olivia Utley is still with us in Westminster. And a shocking development, Olivia, and a rare statement, actually, from Crispin Blunt, naming himself as the MP who's been arrested.
Well, this is an absolutely shocking event, as you say, Ellie. And yesterday, The Sun published their exclusive story revealing that a Conservative MP in his 60s had been arrested in the Hawley area. Cue all sorts of Westminster journalists looking through the lists of Conservative MPs in their 60s in the Surrey area. And eventually, Crispin Blunt decided that the speculation wasn't doing anyone any good, so came forward and made this unprecedented statement on Twitter, where he revealed that it was him who had been arrested on the charge of rape and possessing illegal drugs. Now, it wouldn't be appropriate to comment on the substance of those allegations, which Crispin Blunt has firmly denied. He says that he is cooperating with the police and he is confident that this investigation won't end in a conviction. But nonetheless, this is a big problem for Rishi Sunak. There are already, as you mentioned in your introduction there, 9 Conservative MPs embroiled in some sort of sexual misconduct case. Some of them have had the whip suspended pending the result of internal parliamentary investigations, and others are actually facing police investigations. 2 are even in prison. Imran Khan and Charlie Elphicke are both serving sentences for serious sexual offences. Now, the last thing that Rishi Sunak wants is for the Conservative Party to get embroiled in yet another sleaze scandal. And, of course, there is the possibility of a by-election if Crispin Blunt's conviction, if Crispin Blunt does end up being convicted, then his parliamentary constituency will be able to decide whether or not they want to keep him on as an MP. Now, in the history of these recall petitions, as they're known, no constituency has decided to keep on the MP, so it would almost certainly result in a by-election. We saw what happened to the Conservatives in the by-elections last week. Mid-Bedfordshire and Tamworth, both real Tory strongholds, were overturned by Labour. Rishi Sunak is very aware that there is going to be a general election sometime between the end of this year and the end of next year. The last thing that he wants in the run-up to that general election are these bruising, crushing by-election defeats, which now seem to be almost a monthly event.
OK, Olivia Utley there for us in Westminster. Thank you very much for that update.
Superb. OK, now a delegation from Hamas visited Moscow yesterday for talks over foreign and Russian hostages being held by the group in Gaza.
Well, the Kremlin, which blames the current crisis on the failure of US diplomacy and wants an immediate ceasefire, has ties to all key players in the region, including Israel, Iran and Palestine.
But the chances of Moscow's attempts to mediate the conflict look low as Israel calls its move an obscene step and Western officials warn of an axis of terror.
Well, it's day 21, would you believe, of the Israel-Hamas conflict, and EU leaders are calling for so-called humanitarian pauses in fighting between Israel and Hamas in order to allow aid into Gaza. But they're not asking for a lasting ceasefire.
They say rapid, safe and unhindered access is needed as 27 EU nations express their gravest concern for the humanitarian situation on the ground.
Well, UN aid agencies say they have begun to significantly reduce their operations in Gaza because they have almost exhausted their fuel reserves.
And meanwhile, Hamas says about 50 hostages being held in Gaza have been killed as a direct result of Israel bombarding the Strip in retaliation for Hamas's 7th of October attack.
Well, let's cross live now to GB News' security editor, Mark White, who's in Tel Aviv for us this morning. And let's start, Mark, with those extraordinary scenes of President Putin of Russia inviting Hamas to Moscow.
a great deal of anger here in Israel about that decision by Moscow to invite these Hamas leaders over there for talks. Israel and Russia have had relatively good relations, but they've clearly been damaged by this particular move on the part of the Russian authorities. Now, from Vladimir Putin's point of view, of course, there are Russian or dual national citizens from Russia, we believe, being held hostage. So it's possible they are asking, I'm sure they're asking for the release of those hostages, and there may well be the release of hostages. You would not imagine that Vladimir Putin would be inviting these Hamas leaders across there without something to show for that. He wants to portray himself as the world statesman at this time. In terms of overnight developments, we've had a very significant incursion on the ground again, this time into central Gaza. Dozens of tanks and bulldozers used to demolish the border fence into Gaza, for these tanks and troops to go in to strike Hamas positions, to take out, we're told, anti-tank missile launchers. It's all about preparing the ground for that eventual ground invasion when it begins. It's been busy here in central Israel as well, in Tel Aviv. It's come under 4 rocket barrages, very large rocket barrages, in as many days, just in the last couple of days, in fact. 3 separate air raids that took place yesterday, people rushing in Tel Aviv to the shelters as the Iron Dome missile defense system took out those rockets heading for Tel Aviv. And one other important piece of information to bring to you in terms of overnight developments: the US military has struck at targets in eastern Syria, targets linked, they say, to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, linked to a number of attacks on US forces in Iraq and Syria in the past 10 days that have led to 21 service personnel from the US being injured.
OK, Mark White, thanks for that latest update live from Tel Aviv.
Now, councils do not have enough funding simply to stand still as they face billions in funding gaps across the next 2 years. That's according to the organisation representing them.
Yeah, the Local Government Association, also known as the LGA, says the increasing pressure on areas such as homelessness services and children's social care is causing the strain.
Well, the analysis claims that despite additional government funding, councils could see a funding gap of up to £4 billion over the next 2 financial years. And
joining us now is GB News reporter Theo Chikomba. Theo, tell us about this report, really quite damning.
Yes, well, a very good morning to you. As you've mentioned in that report, it's saying many councils across the country will be left without enough money, essentially, to run their services. Where I am in Woking this morning, what's happened here is that earlier this year they declared bankruptcy. And this is a result of what happened in previous years when it was a Conservative-run borough council. It's now being run by the Liberal Democrats. And essentially, they had invested in things like hotels and skyscrapers over the last couple of years, and it's left them in a deficit of £1.2 billion. We've seen a similar picture in places like Birmingham, where earlier this year the council there, Birmingham City Council, was declared bankrupt. And what people really care about here are local services. For example, swimming pools, toilets, and dance organisations, one which operates here, which allows young children to get involved and compete, which is funded by the Borough Council, and there are concerns that their budget may be cut. We've heard from the leader of the council, the Borough Council here, and she says no firm decisions have been made on which funding will be cut, but she's saying we are facing some difficult decisions when it comes to that, and they'll be reporting, fully covering all those areas and telling people what's going to happen next year, February. But also we've heard from Active Surrey, which has criticised Woking Borough Council for the proposed closures and funding cuts worth £900 £100,000. And they went on to say that the group was saying that Woking had the highest child poverty rate in Surrey, and things like swimming, for example, they say are an important life skill should they need to use it later in their life. But of course, many people will be fearing the worst when it comes to council rates, for example, if they have to go up, as we've seen in places like Birmingham.
Okay, Theo Chicomba, thanks for all that update. It really just feels like every council in Britain is going bust, doesn't it?
No, and it's so difficult, isn't it, when council tax is already so expensive, and as Theo said, could just see them increase ever more as budgets are
Which nobody
getting tighter
would
and
like
tighter. No, nobody would like that. Now, should the government get tougher on asylum seekers? We're going to be debating that next, so do stay with us.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new
It's your new teeth.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Welcome back, it's 8:28. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and Ellie.
Now, GB News Breakfast has learned that there have been high-level discussions between government officials and humanitarian charities about hosting Palestinian refugees with UK families.
And for now, we believe the government is reluctant to adopt a similar scheme used for Ukrainians, but with the number of displaced people growing around the world and Britain's asylum backlog fit to burst, today we're asking if we should get harsher, tougher on asylum seekers.
Well, joining us now to debate this is Dr. Krish Kandiah from the Sanctuary Foundation and author and broadcaster Christine Hamilton. Very good to see you both this morning. And Dr. Krish, let's start with you, because you were a part of helping the government set up the Ukrainian host system, that scheme. So do you think we should open our homes to Palestinian refugees now?
I definitely think we should. The UK public were incredibly generous to the people of Ukraine. About 185,000 Ukrainians were welcomed into homes like mine and yours, and we found it incredibly fulfilling as hosts, and our guests were so delighted for that opportunity. We're all watching with horror the bombing that's taking place in Gaza. Of course, no one can excuse the terrible things that Hamas did, and we, of course, would like the hostages to be released. But in the middle of this conflict are 1 million children. They didn't vote for Hamas. They're not supporters of this war. They're caught in the middle. And back in the Second World War, when our cities were being bombed, we found a way to get our children to safety as evacuees. We think that same option should be available to Gazan families. And I know already scores of families in the UK are willing to do this. We've already started a little campaign where people can pledge their support and say if there was a scheme, we'd be willing to do it.
OK, let's bring in Christine Hamilton at that point. Christine, why should the UK take in Palestinians when Egypt, Jordan, Qatar and all of the Arabian states have put up the drawbridge?
Well, you have answered the question absolutely. If the Arab countries, especially the neighbouring countries, are not prepared to do it, why should we? I mean, we are historically and now we are one of the most generous countries on the planet for taking people in, genuine asylum seekers. The problem in this country is that the waters have been muddied by all the illegals, the criminals who are coming over in boats, etc., etc. And of those who come over 95% do not have any documentation. Now, that is a criminal offence. Tony Blair made it a criminal offence to destroy your documents, and I can't believe that they all just literally don't have their documents. They've been thrown overboard. And since 2016, we have our granting of asylum claims has gone up by 43%, whereas in the rest of the EU it's gone down by 25%. So we have nothing to chide ourselves for. And the Sanctuary Foundation, Dr. Krish's organisation, does amazing work. Of course they do. And nobody would deny anyone who is genuinely fleeing persecution, etc. But we are seeing people coming from France. Now, there is no question that they're being persecuted in France. We cannot cope with the people we've got. If an individual family wants to take some children from Gaza, that is one thing. But the government cannot embark on a huge nationwide scheme to take these children. We absolutely can't. It is the responsibility of the Arab nations, frankly. And we have now this problem, I can't remember his name, Jenrick, has just said that we're going to get people out of these 4-star hotels. Well, why on earth were they put in 4-star hotels to start with? During COVID, we built Nightingale centres at the drop of a hat. Why can't we build places to keep these people while we process their claims? So no, I don't think we should have a mass welcoming of immigrants. No, I'm sorry, I don't.
Dr. Krish, how would you like to come back to that?
Well, I agree with Christine that our asylum-seeking friends shouldn't be stuck in hotels. In fact, we've even had Afghan refugees who were our allies, who helped our military forces in Afghanistan, stuck in hotels for 2 years. I agree with her on that. I do believe the British public are willing to step forward and offer sanctuary to children and women that need to flee the conflict. And I don't think we should confuse the illegal migration or the spontaneous arrivals, as some people call it, and this safe and legal route. We would be in control of who came. And I think we should just play our part. Imagine that Britain went first and we said, look, we'll take the first 1,000. There's a lot of people in the rest of the world that would step forward, I think, if we led the way with generosity.
OK.
Sorry.
Dr. Krish, a real risk, though. Chip Chapman, security expert, told us on GB News last week that we would simply have no idea who the refugees were. And we already know that at least 25% of refugees who claim to be children aren't. And he also said that Hamas, rather than awaiting decimation, will simply dissolve into the civilian population and try and flee the country. How could we possibly know that the refugees we were getting into the UK weren't actually members of Hamas?
I think we could do a very simple thing by taking primary school children. That might be the way that we could at least start the ball rolling, get an immediate reaction to this incredibly terrible situation. We did the same in 1939 when we opened our borders to 10,000 Jewish children fleeing the Nazis. It's one of the most wonderful things our nation's done in its history. It's time for the same privilege for children in Gaza.
Christine, we've got about 20 seconds left with you.
Right. Well, we certainly did in 1939. We were amazing. We are about the most generous country in the world, but we are full. England is the most densely populated country in Europe. We are we grant 3 times more visas than France. We're 3 times as populated as France. We simply can't do it. And the Arab countries, they are the ones who have the first duty, in my opinion, to take these refugees.
OK, we have to leave it there. Dr. Chris Kandaya and Christine Hamilton is still going. I'm afraid we have to leave it there. A spirited and balanced and fair debate. Thank you both very much indeed.
Yes, let us know what you make of that. gbnews@gbnews.com. Well, it's time now to go through all the latest sports news with our new friend and member of the family, broadcaster Ashley Wilmot. What have you got for us, Ashley?
Well, we need to talk about the rugby, and I have got the perfect person to do that. We're joined on the line by Rugby World Cup winner Rachel Burford. Rachel, welcome. Thank you for joining us on GB News. Firstly, England women are in action currently as we speak against Canada in World Rugby's new WXV tournament, revolutionising the women's game. What have you made of that one? It looks like they're on for their second win on the bounce.
Yeah, they've obviously kicked off really well last weekend with victory over Australia, and looks like they're going to have a second convincing win this morning as well over Canada, currently leading 33-12. Pretty comfortable for England at the moment.
That's what we like to see, isn't it? And of course, we've got a lot of action to look forward to, including the England men's bronze medal match against Argentina. How difficult would it have been for England to kind of pick themselves up after that semi-final defeat to South Africa, especially with everything that's been going on with, you know, the Tom Curry situation?
Yeah, look, I think ultimately it's such a mentally challenging game to get yourself up for. It's not the final that they want to be playing in. However, it's still an opportunity to represent their country. They made the nation so proud last week, and that's what they're going to want to be able to do again tonight, and, you know, leave this tournament with a win and on their terms. So I think, yeah, as challenging as it will be, it's still an opportunity to represent their country and play with an immense amount of pride. And look, it's an end of an era for a lot of those players as well, so they'll want to go out on their best terms, put their best foot forward. So really looking forward to it. And, you know, this was a great game in the early round against Argentina, so it's matched up to be a great game.
Yes, well, I cannot wait to watch. Like you just mentioned there, it is kind of a changing of the guard, a last game for a lot of players, including Courtney Lawes. He announced his retirement, although he isn't featured in the team, surprisingly. But Ben Youngs will be starting in that number 9 shirt for the last time. So it will be emotional stuff.
Yeah, it really will be. I think, you know, all the players, you want the opportunity to try and finish on your terms. So the fact that Ben Youngs has that chance this evening, you know, what a servant he's been. Same for Courtney Lawes. So, yeah, there'll be a lot of emotion around it as well. And that will be the other thing that galvanises the group to finish it off for those guys.
Well, let's hope that we can at least come away with a bronze medal. Not what we were hoping for, but, you know, a medal is a medal at the end of the day. And I do want to quickly ask you, while we've got you on the line, what are your thoughts on the Rugby World Cup final? South Africa against the All Blacks. South African captain Siya Kolisi saying this is the biggest game of our lifetime. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, well, I think if you look at the history, obviously 1995 was when they last played in a World Cup final against one another. And we know what that did for South Africa. So, you know, 2 of the best teams in the world going head to head, 2 different styles as well. I mean, it's going to be an absolute brilliant game and a spectacle for the sport. Really tough one to call. So I hope you're not going to put me on the spot, Ashley. But yeah, really looking forward to that one. I'm actually fortunate to be there live. But yeah, can't wait to see those 2 go head to head.
Very, very jealous. Quickly, who's going to win?
I'll back South Africa.
Oh, well, we'll have to wait and see. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us. So, will South Africa win the Rugby World Cup? We'll have to wait and see, won't we?
Yeah, Rachel seems to think so.
I'm a bit all over it after we got battered out.
Oh.
No, that's just me. I'm a sore loser.
Oh, dear.
Hey, thank you, Ashley. Superb
Thanks,
stuff.
Ashley.
OK, coming up, Fish and Chips, Batman and Robin, or Del Boy and Rodney. Some of Britain's favourite duos, but can you guess which one topped the list? Find out after this.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh! No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Welcome back. It's 8:42. You're watching and listening to Breakfast with Martin and Ellie.
And joining us to go through some of the day's headlines this morning is author and journalist Susan Holder and broadcaster and lawyer Andrew Ebon. Very good to see you both this morning. And Susan, we wanted to start with you with this story about your dear husband, Noddy Holder,
yes,
and his battle with cancer of the esophagus.
Correct. Yeah. So it's a breaking story this week, really. We 5 years ago, Noddy was diagnosed with esophageal cancer and was given 6 months to live, which, as you can imagine, was terrifying and horrifying. But the good news is we're 5 years later, and he's had a form of chemotherapy that was very targeted, very intense. When he was given it 5 years ago, they told him that it was something that they hadn't really given to anybody his age. He was 72 when he was diagnosed and when they gave it to him. And they never make any promises with any cancer treatment, but he's doing great. And we've decided to talk about it now to raise awareness of esophageal cancer. It's not the same as throat cancer. It's one of the gastric cancers, and it's not something that gets a lot of attention. And we also want to help the Christie with the work they're doing into the amazing treatment that they have.
As a lifelong, fan of Noddy, I mean, first of all, God bless him.
Yeah.
The nation, I'm sure, is sending, that.
I know we've
collective
shocked
love.
some people, and it's not what we meant to do, and we don't want to upset anybody. And the same, and also we're very aware that a lot of people are going through all sorts of different things and all sorts of different illnesses, and we don't have the magic answer, but we can say to people, even with a devastating diagnosis like that, there is always hope. You never know. They're bringing on treatments all the time, and this treatment that he had has kept him healthy now for, the last 4.5 years.
And how are you, and how is Noddy? And especially now that you're sharing the story so openly after so long.
It's harder than I thought to talk about, actually.
Of course it is. Of course
Yeah, I kind of thought, oh, this far on, and he's been well for so long.
Now, Dolly.
And I know.
And you are. You're looking well
and
now.
it's a difficult one because it takes you back there. And one of the reasons we kept it private was that Noddy wanted to deal with it in his own way, which was to kind of focus and to concentrate. He's done it all with good humour. He's the kind of same naughty, mischievous person he's always been, and he's been through it all like that all the way. But telling other people is one of the hardest things because you see the pain you're causing other people and the worry, and we didn't want to do that, and we don't want to do that now, obviously. He's got a load, and we've had amazing messages, lots of wonderful, wonderful supportive messages. But yeah, so that's why we're kind of doing it now. But we won't kind of, we don't want to keep on talking about it forever. We want to be able to do the work we want to do with the Christie Hospital and raise some kind of funds for the gastric cancer research fund and things like that. But yeah, so it's a weird one.
And you're talking about the first TV interview.
Yeah.
When does that go out? Where can we see it? And what kind of things does Noddy talk about?
Yeah, so he talked on Channel 5 News and on the Alexis Conran show on Channel 5 the other day. There might be other things coming up as well. So he talked about how he kind of faced it, really, and he very honestly, and I was there, so I know it's true, he took that diagnosis on the chin and just went, I've had a great life, I've had a great time. He was worried about me, he was worried about his 3 children, his 2 grandchildren. That was what upset him. But as a kind of person, he just kind of went, well, it is what it is. And at the time when we were told there was nothing they could do, I didn't know what to do. I need a plan. I need to have something that I'm kind of working to. Even if they can't give you any particular guarantees or hope, everyone knows you just need something to be focusing on. He just kind of went, well, it is what it is. But that we were obviously thrown this lifeline.
Oh, Susan, honestly, thank you so much for sharing your
Thank
story
you for
with us. I know it's
asking.
really difficult. You've been through a lot in the past 5 years, but we're sending all of our love to both of you.
Thank you so much.
And it's incredible that you are now using this experience, this painful experience that you had over the last 5 years to raise awareness.
I think it's absolutely fantastic. Anybody in the public eye who can talk about these things, and as Susan said, we've been discussing it, have been getting on fabulously in the green room, but talking about that, because it really just helps others out there.
Yeah.
And it is that message of hope. Because it's devastating
it is a message
getting
of
that sort
hope,
stuff.
yeah.
But we were talking, the other thing we were talking about, was a perfect link into this, is the perfect pair. Because working on the basis, if Noddy and Susan are perfect pair, this is a little report here, about, they've done a little research, and they say what fish and chips are the #1 in the poll to find terrific twosomes. They've got things like burgers and chips, salt and vinegar, Tom and Jerry. They've even got fries and milkshake. But there's a few which we thought were missing. Lennon and McCartney didn't even make it.
Bizarre.
What about Dale Boy and Rodders?
Yes, they are there. That's a good one. Yeah, they are there.
Absolutely, you can have a look. Yeah. We've got Ellie and Martin.
Yeah, that might have been, I think that was 51. It only goes up to 50.
It's gotta be good.
But they missed a few comedy ones, I think. They haven't got people like Morecambe and Wise.
Yeah, I was gonna say, where's
Laurel
that?
and Hardy aren't there? I mean, I'm showing my age, maybe. Maybe they've asked some very young people who don't know who Laurel and Hardy. But I mean, even the Chuckle Brothers aren't there. I think they've missed a few comedy.
I think that's Sam and Ella. You work on that.
But there's some here that are quite surprising. So the obvious one for me would be tea and biscuits, right?
Absolutely.
That's the most British answer ever.
Yeah,
Number 5. That's quite low down the list.
You think so?
We go together like rabbit, ding dong, or whatever the song
really
is.
do. Well,
That's not
Susan,
bad.
Andrew, it's been so good to see you both this morning.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much.
Thank you for sharing that. It was amazing.
Thank you very much. Well, joining us now is Education Secretary Jillian Keegan.
Yeah, she's joining us now live on GB News. Thanks for joining us. And you're the Education Secretary, of course, and a superb initiative you're rolling out today, something we talk about a lot on GB News, and that is the secrecy that often surrounds the sex and education curriculum of children. And there's often a lot of explicit stuff in that, which a lot of people may feel inappropriate, but that's often done in secret. What do you plan to do about that?
Well, there's two things we've done. I've written to all schools and parents as well this week to say that parents must be able to see all materials around relationship, sex and health education. There are no copyright reasons why those materials cannot be shown to parents. I've made that clear to schools, and I've also sent them a pro forma letter that they can send to their providers of these materials in case there's any reason to clear that up. So that's the first thing. The second thing we're doing is we've appointed an independent panel who have been looking at age appropriateness and age limits for each sort of area of sex education that's taught in our schools. So they will be, well, they have already given us some indication, so we're working to update guidance based on their findings, and that will be released before the end of the year.
Well, Ms. Keegan, I've been involved in this myself. I used to teach teenagers about the dangers of pornography addiction in schools. Spoke to about 45,000 across the UK. I noticed something changing in my time, though, and that was this. A lot of activists were getting involved from outside of schools, going into schools, talking about things like LGBTQ, trans stuff, and also quite extreme, sexually explicit material. Is part of the problem the fact that activist teachers are getting in outsiders, your likes of your Stonewalls, your mermaids, and they're getting quite dangerous ideas into young minds? What will you do about that?
Well, these are some of the reports that we've been hearing from the likes of yourself, and there's been some media reports and press reports and paper stories in the paper, etc. And that's why actually we appointed the independent panel. We accepted that we ought to be clearer about what's appropriate to be taught at what age. We've also made it clear that contested views such as there are lots and lots of genders, etc., that they must not be taught as fact. So we are tightening up the guidance to make sure that it's much clearer that relationship and sex education is age appropriate. It's not based on contested facts, it's based on facts, and that all the materials related to the teaching of children in our school, including in this area, can be shown and should be shown to the parents. It's very important actually that parents are involved and a part of this discussion, because of course children have questions when they get home, and their parents are the primary educators of their children in many ways as well.
OK, Jillian, on a specific point, do you think we should be kicking out trans ideology from British classrooms?
Well, actually, on the specific point, we are going to bring forward gender questioning guidance, which enables teachers and head teachers to navigate what is a sensitive area that we do need to treat sensitively as well. But we will be bringing that guidance out, and I hope that will be out as well. I'm working with the Equalities Minister and looking at what we can do in that space, and we'll be bringing that out for consultation. Hopefully, it'll be out before the end of the year.
No, Ms Keegan, whilst we've got you this morning, I needed to ask you about the shocking news last night from Crispin Blunt, the Tory MP who named himself as the MP who's been arrested in connection with rape. Important to say, he says at this point that he believes this is all going to end without charge. But it does follow the Tory MP, Peter Bone, suspended on Wednesday for 6 weeks for bullying and sexual misconduct against a staff member. There are now a total of 9 Tory MPs who've been embroiled in sexual misconduct claims or allegations, following Chris Pincher as well. I mean, Rishi Sunak stood on the steps of Downing Street a year ago and promised a government that will lead with integrity. Are you a government of integrity? Because it looks as though you're a party with a sexual misconduct problem.
Absolutely not, and I'm definitely a person of integrity, and we are a party of integrity. And all you can do in these situations, I mean, obviously these are very serious allegations, so the whip has been suspended or removed in some cases as well. All you can do is act swiftly, support the institutions, whether that's involvement from the police or whether that's Parliamentary Standards Committee, support the institutions and make sure that you act quickly. That's all you can do in these situations. But, you know, I've been in Parliament now for 6.5 years, and I will say the vast majority of my colleagues, you see, you know, no signs of this at all. I haven't seen any examples of this. But when they do happen, and they happen on all parties, you know, it's not just one party. There are a number of people who are currently suspended in other parties as well. So it happens with all parties. I will be honest, it's usually male colleagues as opposed to female colleagues. But all you can do is, when it happens, act with integrity, follow the right processes, and make sure you act on the findings of those.
Ms Keegan, another day, another round of terrible headlines on immigration for the Conservative Party, this time on asylum backlogs. Looking back over time, something leaps out, and that is this is the government that's gone very soft on deportation, very soft on refusing asylum. 76% of those who apply are granted asylum. When are you finally going to get tough on immigration?
Well, we have got tough on immigration. We're the people who have introduced new legislation, because obviously you have to have the law behind you. We've also obviously had the Rwanda policy, which is still in the courts, but that is part of the policy. And we've also got returns agreements now with a number of countries and a new agreement with France as well. We're also looking at alternatives to hotels to bring that bill down to the taxpayer. So we are the ones taking all of the actions, but there is no doubt that this is a huge problem. The numbers are huge. The numbers have been growing. Well, we've actually got a reduction since last year, but you know, this is something that's over the years has become an increasing problem. But the party has put every action in place to try and deal with it. Is the Conservative Party. The party that's blocked every single one of those actions is the Labour Party. So just be very clear on who is getting tough on this.
OK, Ms Keegan. And just finally, GB News Breakfast understands that there have been high-level discussions between government officials and humanitarian charities discussing a plan to host Palestinian refugees. Can you confirm that those conversations have been taking place, and would you support a scheme for Palestinian refugees similar to the scheme that we rolled out for Ukrainians?
No, what we're focused on right now is trying to get that pause so we can get humanitarian aid operationalised, taken to the people who need it and not put into the wrong hands. Any future decisions on any future schemes would be for the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary.
Jillian Keegan, Education Secretary, very good to see you this morning. Thank you so much for your time.
And we're still joined by our panel, Susan. What do you make of what she said? Particularly, I'm interested on your thoughts around sex education in schools, because I saw you there, you know, you were raising your eyebrows. Oftentimes, parents have no idea what their kids are being taught, and oftentimes it's quite X-rated stuff.
I have no idea why you would think that it's not a good idea to include parents in that kind of that part of their education, and that they need to know. But I worked for Childline and the NSPCC for 5 years, going into schools, primary schools, talking to children about all forms of abuse. And sexual abuse is one of the 5 forms that we would talk about. Now, there's nothing explicit in the Childline NSPCC script kind of and work we were given to work with. But we always made it available to the teachers in the schools before. It was all the schools then could, if they wanted to, make it available to parents, and I think most of them did. We never had a problem with parents, but often I would find schools would say, "Oh, we don't want you to talk to them about that." Teachers would ask me to talk about sexual abuse without mentioning the word sex. So how we've gone from that, which we'd always reassure them, we never had an issue. How we've gone from that to now going into more explicit or more dangerous areas of things that aren't really based in fact, I've no idea. It was only a few years ago I was doing that, and actually schools were very, very nervy about Childline going in and talking to children. So how on earth can you get to this point? I don't understand.
And the best education is where the parents and schools work together for the education of their children. That has to happen, and as soon as things are kept from parents, that's not good.
But that has changed. That there is very much a kind of environment now of secrecy. There are teachers who see it, I think, as part of their mission to get their ideology into young minds.
And that's very dangerous. We need to make sure, go back to the system where everybody's there for the best interests of the child.
But I do think they've been a bit asleep at the wheel. Were you convinced by Jillian Keegan?
I think she gives a good account of herself, actually. I think she does. I think she does seem to be across a lot of detail. So I find her quite a reassuring presence. The devil is always in the detail, and actions always speak louder than words. But she does give a good account of herself, I do feel.
Andrew, what do you make of that interview?
I thought she did an effing good job, is what I'd say.
Yeah.
But remember that one. The interesting thing, and this is the hot mic moments, no, I think she is very good at getting out there, dealing with your very tough questions. And I thought she gave some credible responses. Right. There are the devil's in the detail, and as you say, there are a lot of issues that need to be addressed accordingly.
All right. Andrew Eborn, Susan Holder, always a pleasure, never a chore. Thank you. Superb.
Thank you very much, both of you. Now, here's Alex Burkle with the weather.
Hello, good morning. It's Alex Burkle here with your latest GB News weather forecast. A bit of a foggy start for some of us this morning, but then the unsettled theme continues with showers or longer spells of rain. Any mist and murk and fog will gradually clear as we go through the morning. Persistent rain affecting eastern parts of Scotland still. Totals continuing to build up as we go through into the weekend, so some issues here. Otherwise, a fair few showers developing, some of them heavy, perhaps even thundery, and becoming more widespread, pushing inland as we go into the afternoon. Some sunny spells though, and temperatures near normal for the time of year. Highs around 15 Celsius in the south, cooler further north. We're going to continue to see more rain across particularly eastern parts of Scotland as we go through Friday night. Might become a bit more widespread across other parts of Scotland through the night as well. Otherwise, plenty of showers again developing. These will be heavy at times across southern southeastern parts, could cause some impacts here as we go through the early hours of Saturday. Some clear skies around though, so we could see some mist and fog developing once more, and temperatures may be a touch lower than last night for quite a few places. Saturday then, a blustery, showery day for many places. Still seeing some cloud and rain across eastern parts of Scotland, which is why some issues are quite likely. Otherwise, heavy showers, especially towards the south, and notice a spell of wet and windy weather starting to push into the far south later on in the day. Temperatures similar to today for most, perhaps a touch higher for some places, getting into your mid-teens Celsius. Bye-bye.
Good morning, it's 9 o'clock on Friday the 27th of October. These are the stories that we've been covering on Breakfast this morning.
And a massive legal challenge for the Home Office as attempts to clear the backlog in the asylum system could risk creating new delays, according to damning new reports by MPs. Does the government have the will or even the ability to deal with more than 67,000 undecided cases? Olivia Utley will have all the latest.
The Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, has promised to end the use of hotels for migrants, but with the asylum backlog showing no signs at all of shrinking, will he be able to stick to his word?
As a Tory MP reveals he was arrested on suspicion of rape, the number of Conservatives embroiled in sexual misconduct allegation grows to a total of 9. How damaging will this be to a party already on the back foot? We'll have the latest.
And as Israel gears up for a full ground invasion and the West throws its weight behind them, Vladimir Putin wades into the conflict, inviting senior Hamas and Iranian leaders to Moscow for talks. Mark White has all the latest.
Well, within the last few minutes, the Israeli military has just confirmed that it's been able to verify that the number of hostages being held by Hamas is 229.
Wow.
We don't have enough funding to simply stand still. That's the cry from the organisation representing Britain's councils to the Chancellor. How did local authorities get billion-pound black holes in their budgets? Theo Chikomba has more.
And we'll have the latest from Surrey, where there are concerns that there are potential cuts to local services as Woking Borough Council declared bankruptcy.
And as GB News Breakfast learns, there have been high-level government discussions about hosting Palestinian refugees in the UK. We'll debate whether the UK should house refugees from Gaza or whether we should be getting tougher on asylum seekers. You can watch that all online.
The annual Poppy Appeal launches across the UK, and we've been in Leeds speaking to veterans about how important Remembrance is for them. And you can catch that report throughout the day here on GB News.
And last but not least, the most important part of the day, Alex Burker will have all of your important weather forecasts.
Good morning. Watch out for some fog first thing this morning, but that will clear and then it's showers or longer spells of rain for many. I'll have more details later.
Lovely stuff. I'm Martin Daubney.
I'm Ellie Costello, and this is Breakfast on GB News.
Good morning. So to our top story, the asylum backlog that simply refuses to go away.
Yes, the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak pledged the Home Office would clear a huge number of asylum claims by the end of this year. Well, it seems, so far at least, he is nowhere near delivering on that promise.
Yeah, the hope was to ease overcrowding in migrant detention centres and save the taxpayer money on hotels that's running at £8 million per day, every day, holding thousands of people seeking asylum.
Well, a report by a cross-party committee says a huge challenge remains for the Home Office, and the government's plan to reform the asylum system to speed the process up, they say, is incomplete and unrealistic.
Well, earlier on Breakfast, we spoke to Shadow Environment Secretary Steve Reed, who told us how Labour plans to deal with this backlog.
Well, this government's completely lost control of the asylum system, haven't they? It's taking an immense amount of time to deal with individual cases, and while those cases are while people are waiting for their cases to be dealt with, they're being put up in hotels at a staggering cost of £8 million a day. It's shocking. What Labour would do is, instead of using that money on hotel bills, we would use it to recruit 1,000 additional civil servants to deal with these cases faster. That would reduce the hotel bill. The scheme would pay for itself, and then you would get the cases processed much faster.
Well, for more on this and other news from Westminster, we're joined now by our political correspondent, Olivia Utley. And good morning to you, Olivia. This is a damning report from MPs, isn't it?
It is a very damning report, and it seems to suggest that the Conservatives have been massaging the statistics a little bit when it comes to the asylum backlog. Robert Jenrick made a statement in the House of Commons on Wednesday, which Conservative MPs greeted very warmly, saying that over the next 6 months or so, the government would start ending the use of hotels for migrants, which, as Martin mentioned there, costs £8 million per day for the taxpayer. 50,000 migrants in 400 hotels across the country, obviously a deeply unpopular policy. He said that he would be able to start phasing out those hotels because the Conservative government had managed to cut in half the backlog of asylum seekers waiting for their claims to be processed. Well, if you dig a little bit deeper into the data, as this new report from the Public Affairs Committee has done, that's not really true. Yes, the government has managed to halve the backlog of legacy cases, which is defined as cases which were being processed before June 2022. But obviously, while that's been happening, there have been thousands and thousands more migrants coming across the channel. And it's not getting any quicker processing asylum claims. It's always taken, on average, over a year to process an asylum claim. So while that backlog, the legacy backlog, has been gently being chiselled away at, the more migrants come in, and actually the overall backlog is growing a little bit. So how is Robert Jenrick going to manage to end the use of these hotels? Every other measure that the government has come up with, every other alternative provision for housing migrants, RAF Scampton, the Bibby Stockholm, etc., has come under massive criticism, either from locals who don't like the idea of it in their own area, or else from legal questions and safety questions in the case of Bibby Stockholm, where Legionella bacteria was found. So this is going to cause a real headache for the government, and it's exactly what they don't want at this moment, just as those by-election defeats are starting to sink in, and of course when the new general election campaign is starting to ramp up.
And Olivia, we have to talk about the Crispin Blunt allegations. This is the 9th Conservative now under current investigation. Echoes of the 90s, a return to the bad old days of sleaze. How big an issue do you think it's going to be for the Conservative Party as we approach an already traumatic general election cycle for them?
Well, absolutely. It does definitely have echoes of the dying days of the John Major government. There are already 2 former Conservative MPs now serving prison sentences, plus another 7, I think it is, now awaiting, embroiled in some sort of sexual allegations and either awaiting trial by the police or and the courts, or else awaiting a judgment from the internal parliamentary authorities. Now, Crispin Blunt, it must be said, has made a statement absolutely denying these allegations. He says that he is confident that the investigation will not end in a conviction. But of course, for Rishi Sunak, this is yet another headache. It does feel like a sort of sleaze scandal. And the parallels to John Major definitely will be ringing true for Rishi Sunak. It'll be ringing in his ears at the moment. Just before the 1997 by-election, we saw a string of the 1997 election. We saw a string of sex scandals and by-elections, which the Conservatives dramatically lost, just like this year. Will Starmer sweep to victory on a wave of glory and enthusiasm like Tony Blair did in 1997 remains to be seen.
OK, Olivia Lee, thank you for that latest update from Westminster.
Now, a delegation from Hamas visited Moscow yesterday for talks over foreign and Russian hostages being held by the group in Gaza.
The Kremlin, which blames the current crisis on the failure of US diplomacy and wants an immediate ceasefire, has ties to all key players in the region, including Israel, Iran and of course, the Palestinians. But the chances of Moscow's attempts to mediate the conflict look low as Israel calls its move an obscene step and Western officials warn of an axis of terror.
Well, it's day 21 of the Israel-Hamas conflict, and EU leaders are calling for so-called humanitarian pauses in fighting between Israel and Hamas in order to allow aid into Gaza. But they're not asking for a lasting ceasefire.
They say rapid, safe and unhindered access is needed as 27 EU nations express their gravest concern for the humanitarian situation on the ground.
UN aid agencies say they have begun to significantly reduce their operations in Gaza because they have almost exhausted their fuel reserves.
And meanwhile, Hamas says about 50 hostages being held in Gaza have been killed as a result of Israel bombarding the Strip in retaliation for Hamas's 7th of October attack. With the question being asked, is this now an escalating conflict?
Well, let's cross live now to GB News' security editor, Mark White, who's in Tel Aviv for us this morning. Many developments overnight, Mark, but let's first touch on that breaking news that Israel has confirmed the number of hostages being held in Gaza.
Yes, that's right. The Israeli Defense Forces now confirming that 229 people is the number of hostages that they have been able to verify. What they're doing is a slow, progressive task of trying to identify those who've been missing, that may be dead and bodies not recovered, against those who they believe have been taken hostage. And that's why every day or two that number of hostages continues to grow. It's now risen by 5 from the previous total to 229 hostages being held. And of course, it comes as this delegation, very controversially from Hamas, has gone to Moscow at Vladimir Putin's invitation. That has been very severely criticized by Israel, who say that that decision is deplorable. And the Russian media now reporting one of those Hamas officials is saying there can be no further hostage releases until there's a ceasefire, and also saying that they need time to locate those abducted on the 7th of October and a calm environment in which to release them. Of course, the Israeli officials say that this is just playing straight into Hamas's hands, that really what they want is a ceasefire so that they continue to dig in and entrench their positions ahead of an eventual Israeli invasion. But on day 21 of this conflict, other significant developments overnight: a further ground incursion by the Israeli military, this time into central Gaza. They've released images of tanks, bulldozers going through the border fence there. They've targeted anti-tank missile systems and other Hamas positions there. And in central Israel, here in Tel Aviv, for a 4th time in just 24 hours, this city has come under a very significant rocket barrage. pictures showing those Iron Dome missile defence systems firing into action and intercepting those Hamas rockets as they came over into Tel Aviv itself. 4 people so far we know have been injured as 2 of those rockets got through and struck apartment buildings in the greater Tel Aviv area.
Concerned should we be about Hamas visiting the Kremlin? Because in more peaceful times, a Russian-supplied Hamas would be incredibly dangerous. But Putin is overextended in Ukraine, but still, this is very concerning.
Well, there's no doubt that Vladimir Putin would love to see himself as a world statesman here, leading to some kind of a breakthrough in this conflict. And it may be despite what this official has told the Russian media about no more hostage releases until there's a ceasefire. It may be that through these back channels that Russia is able to secure some more hostages. We'll have to wait and see. But it's absolutely not the kind of development that Israel wants to see. Israel has relatively good relations with Russia, but this will do a lot of harm to those relations as they describe this decision by Vladimir Putin to invite those responsible for the slaughter of 1,400 people on the 7th of October as utterly deplorable.
Mark White, deeply concerning, so thank you for that latest update live from Tel Aviv.
Now, councils do not have enough funding simply to stand still as they face billions in funding gaps across the next 2 years. That's according to the organisation representing them.
Yeah, the Local Government Association, also known, of course, as the LGA, says the increasing pressure on areas such as homelessness services and children's social care is causing this strain.
Well, the analysis claims that despite additional government funding, councils could see a funding gap of up to £4 billion over the next 2 financial years.
And joining us now to discuss this further is GB News reporter Theo Chikomba. Theo, it seems like every council in Britain is going bust. What's going on?
Yes, you're absolutely right. Many of them across the country are facing financial challenges, and this call by the LGA comes as the Chancellor is expected to make his autumn statement in a couple of weeks' time. Councils in the last year have received funding support, but they say it's simply not enough to help them withstand some of the challenges they're going through. Where I am at the moment in Woking, the Woking Borough Council were previously led by a conservative should I say, but are currently being led by Liberal Democrats. And what's happened over the last few years is that they spent lots of money on skyscrapers and hotels, and it's been referred to as a risky investment. And that's left them with a deficit of £1.2 billion. Well, for people who live in this area, they'll be concerned about some of the cuts, for example, proposals to cutting funding for things like toilets or swimming pools, or some of those things which young children also use as well, and council tax as well to increase. We've seen a similar issue at Birmingham City Council earlier this year, who declared bankruptcy, and people are being sent into that area to try and sort out that situation. As for here, though, there's going to be a meeting in February, and then September next year is when they'll outline some of those closures, potential closures. But for many people here, they'll be concerned about some of those local things which they use regularly.
OK, Theo Chikomba, thank you for that update.
Now, Alex Burkle has your weather for you.
Hello, good morning. It's Alex Burkle here with your latest GB News weather forecast. A bit of a foggy start for some of us this morning, but then the unsettled theme continues with showers or longer spells of rain. Any mist and murk and fog will gradually clear as we go through the morning. Persistent rain affecting eastern parts of Scotland still. Totals continuing to build up as we go through into the weekend, so some issues here. Otherwise, a fair few showers developing, some of them heavy, perhaps even thundery, and becoming more widespread, pushing inland as we go into the afternoon. Some sunny spells though, and temperatures near normal for the time of year. Highs around 15 Celsius in the south, cooler further north. We're going to continue to see more rain across particularly eastern parts of Scotland as we go through Friday night. Might become a bit more widespread across other parts of Scotland through the night as well. Otherwise, plenty of showers again developing. These will be heavy at times across southern southeastern parts, could cause some impacts here as we go through the early hours of Saturday. Some clear skies around though, so we could see some mist and fog developing once more, and temperatures maybe a touch lower than last night for quite a few places. Saturday then, a blustery, showery day for many places. Still seeing some cloud and rain across eastern parts of Scotland, which is why some issues are quite likely. Otherwise, heavy showers, especially towards the south, and notice a spell of wet and windy weather starting to push into the far south later on in the day. Temperatures similar to today for most, perhaps a touch higher for some places, getting into your mid-teens Celsius. Bye-bye.
Now, the annual Poppy Appeal launched across the UK. You can see we're both wearing our poppies today. Lots of you getting in touch on that on email.
Yeah, we've got last year's poppies on still with the plastic stem.
Yeah, we've got the plastic ones on.
Is fully recyclable. They're arriving shortly, so we should have them on later on today. But on this topic, Richie says this: yes, I agree with Martin and Ellie, and you're right. You don't see so many people selling poppies anymore. I will not be buying a green poppy. I'll buy a red one, and I'll get a wreath to put on my dad's grave, who fought in World War II. God bless you.
Yeah, God bless you. But they aren't they aren't green in colour, quite important to say. They are still red in colour. They're just green as in the sense that they're environmentally friendly. They're made of paper from recyclable recyclable coffee cups, I was reading.
It's a good use for them, at least.
I would like to know how they fare in the rain, though.
Yeah, that's the thing.
A bit of a worry, because you have it on the outside of your coat.
Yeah, they're weird. I'm also concerned, because the thing I like about these plastic ones, even though they might not be good for turtles or anything, is that they go through lapel holes really easily and they sit really nice. And I just worry that those paper ones are going to be a bit of an effort. But I'm definitely still going to buy one.
Yeah.
I always have a metal one, but I feel a bit tight if I don't buy another one. So I always buy a fresh one.
Yeah, absolutely. And Steve has been in touch. Morning to you, Steve, saying the problem with donating is every time I see a poppy, I've only got a card and no cash. That's it. It's a cashless society we're living in. Due to not getting paid in cash or carrying it anymore, surely this is affecting the Poppy Appeal. Very few people now carry cash. That's an interesting point, isn't it?
But surely, Steve, at this time of year, just pop a couple of quid in your pocket. It's only once a year, and every penny counts.
Yeah, if you can buy a poppy and support the Royal British Legion, do make sure you do, because the Poppy Appeal launches across the UK, and we have been speaking to people and veterans in Leeds about how important Remembrance is for them. So we'll have more on that report in just a few moments.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Welcome back. Well, before the break, we were talking about poppies, and our Yorkshire reporter Anna Riley went to the poppy appeal launch in Leeds.
Order, standard.
Standard bearers mark the launch of the National Poppy Appeal in Leeds. It helps veterans like Simon Brown, who was shot in the face during a tour in Iraq. The bullet entered his left cheek and exited the other side.
I was fortunate enough to be conscious, survive the event. Did my own first aid for 25 minutes, and then when we got to medical facilities at Basel Palace, I was put into a drug-induced coma, and I woke up Christmas Eve 2006, and then found out, what the damage actually was. Over 10 years, I had 25 operations, about 140 hours of surgery to reconstruct my face. My left eye was removed, and I retained 25% vision in my right eye.
It's not just the funds raised, but the symbol of the poppy that supports those that have served in the armed forces.
Wearing a poppy just says, I see your suffering and I'm thinking of you.
Tragically, soldiers like Chris Turton have paid the ultimate sacrifice. He lost his life in 2007 after his vehicle was destroyed by IEDs in Iraq. Today would have been the 19th wedding anniversary with his widow, Sharon.
I'd lost my military family when I lost Chris, so the Royal British Legion became my new family. I started off as a volunteer, now I'm a member of staff, so you cut me open and it's poppies that come out of me. But that's the way they've helped me. They've given me something else to live for, and I'm also able to keep Chris in other people's thoughts as well as my own.
The Royal British Legion community has given veteran Jonathan Calvert a new purpose as a civilian.
I've just retired recently from the Air Force, and I want to give back to the community. The Royal British Legion have helped me so much, helping with transitioning from being in service for over 20 years to now being a veteran.
The newly designed plastic-free poppy is hoped to boost fundraising this year.
The poppy appeal this year is obviously very exciting. It's the first new poppy for 28 years that we've had, so it's redesigned, which is very eco-friendly. We would like as many people as possible to support the poppy appeal because we'd like to really let them know that they do care and that they're looking after our armed forces community.
The poppy represents all those who lost their lives in service. From the First World War to now, we will remember them. Anna Riley, GB News, Leeds.
Oh, do buy a poppy if you can. That's it from us this morning. You're up tomorrow, 6 a.m.
6 a.m.
Breakfast again, all weekend. And up next is Britain's Newsroom with Tom and Emily.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new
Yes, I
teeth.
know.
I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper.